this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
You're listening to a podcast, so you're doing something else too, like maybe scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving places you like without thinking you'll get them, because that's what house hunting has become. But Redfin isn't built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. Redfin agents close twice as many deals as other agents, which means when you find a place you love, you've got a real shot at getting it. Redfin helps turn saved listings into real addresses. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
Hey, this is U.S. Olympic gold medalist Tara Davis-Woodhull.
And I'm U.S. Paralympic gold medalist Hunter Woodhull.
As athletes, our lives are about having a clear path.
And a team that you can absolutely trust.
So when it came to getting the best mortgage,
we chose PennyMac.
PennyMac is proud to be the official mortgage provider of Team USA and you.
Learn more at pennymac.com. PennyMac Loan Services, LLC, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS ID 35953. Licensed by the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation under the California Residential Mortgage Lending Act. Conditions and restrictions may apply.
Hey everybody, Robert Evans here, and I wanted to let you know this is a compilation episode. So every episode of the week that just happened is here in one convenient and with somewhat less ads package for you to listen to in a long stretch if you want. If you've been listening to the episodes every day this week, there's going to be nothing new here for you, but you can make your own decisions. Oh, It Could Happen Here is the podcast that you're listening to right now. And while we normally talk about it could happening here, if you've been living in France recently, then some of it has been happening to you. I don't know if that's a bad introduction. We're talking about the riots that have recently convulsed large chunks of both European France and some of their overseas territories. So we're going to be chatting about that. I've seen a lot of disinfo. There's a lot of like people flipping out about guns and stuff, and a lot of bad information, people blaming it on like Ukrainian weapons sneaking over. All that's bullshit. But there's a real fascinating history here, and the riots, as much as people, specific bad actors, have attempted to make them into like some new and horrifying thing. It's not just like a France be rioting thing. There's like a history that's pretty clear that explains like why this happened in France this time, why it happened in 2005, why it happened in the late 80s.
Yeah,
like,
2007 was I think the other big one in this kind of. I mean, these have been happening.
Yeah,
it's been happening for decades.
We're going to talk about all of that. Yeah, so Mia, I'm going to let you take the lead here, and I'll chime in, PR in.
Yeah, so okay, I guess we should basically briefly talk about, like, before we go into the history, like what actually this is. So, well, I guess it'll be 2 weeks ago when this goes up. A cop did like a traffic stop of this kid in a car, and they just put a gun through the window and shot him. It's really bad. There's video of it. If for some reason you want to see a cop sticking a gun in a car and shooting a 17-year-old, it's really bad. This is kicked off like It's always difficult to like measure how intense a riot is. When it started, I saw people saying it was like more intense than like the 2005 ones. This is like, we've talked a lot about French rioting on this show. These specific kinds of riots are like by far the largest and most intense like kinds of riots that happen in France. This is like, a significant escalation from everything that's been happening, even in the last sort of like
for
7 years, which have been, there have been a lot of riots in France recently. These are by far the most intense. In the time I've been writing this, the police killed a second person so I'm going to give my account of what I think happens. The French police are going like, oh, well, who can say how this person was hit by a projectile? But as best I can tell, they shot a guy in the chest with a flashball, it's effectively a grenade launcher that shoots flashbang grenades. Now, it's supposed to be it's a quote unquote less lethal munition. But the thing about less lethal munitions is that if you shoot people directly with them, they die, and they just fucking killed this guy.
They're less lethal because they are not meant to be shot at people. They're meant to have a dispersal effect when shot near people. If you shoot people with them, they're very much lethal.
Yeah, and we talked about in the last episode that I did about this. There was another guy who thankfully has regained consciousness, but was in a coma for several months because he was also shot by. I think he was shot by a. Maybe it was one. I forget. I should have actually looked this up before I did this, but he was shot by like a similar less lethal munition, and he thankfully has survived. This guy did not. Like they just killed him. The reporting about it has been terrible. Like the Guardian headline said, man struck by projectile at protest, which again, this guy was shot by the cops, like directly into his chest with one of these weapons. So it's been really bad. And, so to get an understanding of what's happening here too, I want to go through this. There are sort of like 4 broad types of people who rioted in France. So, so the first kind of rioter, I think, is the one that people are like maybe most familiar with, which is like the French far left, like riots a lot. This is mostly anarchists, some other people. And that's like a kind of standard Parisian riot will be these people rioting. We talked a bit about sort of the development of the Black Bloc in France in the last episode we did about this. There's also sort of like more mainstream left, like trade union groups who will have giant marches, and those also sometimes turn into riots because they get attacked by the police and stuff like that. And those ones tend to be larger. Like the trade union ones have more people, but tend to be less rioty. There's the Gilets jaunes or the Yellow Vests, who are mostly people from rural areas who either sort of like do roadblocks in rural areas, or they come into cities and do marches and riots, and they riot pretty intensely. And these 3 groups have started to be, like part of what we've been seeing in the pension like reform protests and like riots have been these groups starting to work together. But there's another group of people in France who riot, who are the residents of the banlieue. That's not how you pronounce it. God damn it. Okay. Before I did this, I looked up how you pronounce it, and I've now forgotten. It's banlieue. That's how you. Well, okay.
Yeah, I'm not gonna offer you any advice.
Unfortunately, I have to say this word like 40 times.
I can't pronounce French words without doing the ha, which is I'm a child of the post 9/11 era. It's written into my DNA. I can't help it. I'm sorry. You guys were right about that war, but it's still like. It seared into me as if with a laser cutter, so I'm not going to try to pronounce it.
My excuse is I'm holding a grudge from that time they owned a bunch of Shanghai for like a bunch of years. So
yeah, there's actually many fine reasons to insult the French. And they're just all things you can go after every other powerful white country that ever existed.
Yeah.
Or other country for that matter. I mean, France is pretty classic colonialism in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and we are. Oh boy, are we going to be getting into that? Yeah. Which actually that's a good good jumping off point for who these people are. So the banlieue, I might just say suburb because I can't do this.
Yeah, look, it's the French word for suburbs. Suburbs in France are different. Like in the United States, the suburbs have been up until at least pretty recently a fairly reactionary, whatchamacallit,
white flight. Enclaves.
Yeah, it's a lot of white conservatives lived in the burbs. It was kind of like one of the reliable areas for Republican votes and stuff. In France, like upper income people with more money are a lot more frequently living near the center of town. And the suburbs, a lot of which were like built specifically for like communities of people from French overseas population who were moving to the country, like they set up like public housing and stuff for them. I think the idea was that if you like moved people over in communities into these neighborhoods, it might make integration and stuff easier. There's a lot of reasons why this didn't work that I'm not an expert on, but like there were a lot of problematic aspects of the execution, including the attitude that goes back pretty far among a lot of French folks that like, well, a positive thing is if they just kind of become French and drop any other aspects of their heritage. And anyway, whatever. It's a whole thing. But
yeah, we're gonna get into this. Yeah.
When we talk about suburbs in France, we are not talking about like areas where upper middle class people bought giant houses, right? Like that's not what they are.
Yeah, these are very like they're not exactly the same as like American housing projects, but they're much closer to that than they are like the sort of American white flight stuff.
Yes.
And the people who live there, there are some white people, like white French people who live there, but there's also a lot of French people who are like either like some of them are pretty recent immigrants. There's a lot of people from Algeria, like specifically, and the way that like the French understand this basically is like all these people are like black and Muslim and like that, okay, the French are very racist. Like, and this is the thing that like, I was in academia for a little bit, right? Like I like thought I understood the like average level of racism of an academic. Holy fucking shit. Oh my God. I'm gonna quote for something about the suburbs, like that's from a piece. I'm gonna talk about that piece just a little bit because I think it's a really interesting way of thinking about like what the attitude in France is. So this is about the banlieue. The French word for suburb is banlieue, a word derived from bannir, mettre à ban, that is to exclude or banish. And this is a thing. This is from an article called The French Autumn Riots 2005 and the Crisis of Republican Integration. And this is a really interesting piece because like half of it is like pretty reasonable sort of like analysis of how the left sort of just like failed and betrayed these people. And then the other half of it is them talking about how like Muslim people and like people from like North Africa have like inherently patriarchal, like reactionary family structures. And that because of this, they can't be like integrated into French society. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, this is just a random academic and he just like sounds like a Stormfront guy. It's fucking wild. So I want to talk a bit about how these things came to be, because I think it gets to sort of like, what these places actually are and why these people are rioting. And to do this, we need to go back to the French conquest of Algeria. So, all right. So the French government.
Yeah. It's like, it's second maybe to the Germans in terms of like the brutality of the conquest. And honestly, like it's kind of they're both so horrific. It's kind of pointless to be like, which of these is worse? These are both like genocides that large chunks of the world just decided to pretend didn't happen.
Yeah. Although the thing with the French version of it is that because it's the French, it's like the actual end, the French political end of it is basically like a tragic comedy. So I'm going to tell the story.
Yeah, a lot of it's the result of incompetence. And I mean, we talk about this in our Napoleon III episodes of Behind the Bastards, but yeah.
Yeah, so like the official casus belli for the French in this war is that the French took out all these grain loans under like the Directory and then like under Napoleon from the Algerian government. The Algerian government was like, hey, are you ever paying this back? And the French were just like, no. So this ended in like a tiff where the governor of Algeria hit the French ambassador with a fly swatter. And this led to the French monarchy at this point is led by this guy named Charles X, who's Mike Duncan calls him one of the great idiots of history, and he's like about to get overthrown. So he's like, oh, I'm going to invade Algeria, and this is going to like distract everyone from the fact that everyone hates me and they're going to overthrow me. And this doesn't work, right? Like, so the French like conquer Algeria, but Charles X is overthrown literally 3 weeks after this finishes. But the sort of crucial thing here is that like the successive French governments keep control of Algeria, and they, this is like one of the places where the sort of like modern French racism emerges from is there's this, the whole invasion is wrapped up in this like monumental layer of racism that's about like, oh, we're going to free Algeria from quote like Oriental despotism. This is like a civilizing mission. And we're going to like, and this is the stuff that, if you've seen any like French social media post about this, like now, right? Like this is the kind of racism they still do, which is they consider Islam like a backwards culture. It needs to be like integrated into French republicanism. And this is
Yeah,
and this stuff this specific kind of French racism is very, very old. I'm just also briefly mention we're going to be mostly talking about Algeria here because like a lot of the people who end up living in these suburbs are Algerian, but like the French had a whole empire. They conquered a bunch of parts of like a bunch of Western Africa. They,
Yeah, and this was also it's worth noting a lot of it was conquered very recently. Like it was only in the late 1800s, I think, that they solidified their control over Algeria. It was kind of right in the same period, just kind of directly ahead of the Franco-Prussian War that they took a lot of Indochina. Like this was they were kind of later to having huge overseas possessions, but unlike the Germans, they made up for it in terms of the breadth of their acquisitions, if you want to call it that.
It gets fucking well. Although the one thing I think is interesting about this is like Algeria, the French conquer Algeria after they've lost Haiti.
Yes.
Which is like a very interesting sort of like thing here. But like, but one of the things that this gets to is that like the French state, like literally it doesn't matter like who, like in what period of time in French colonial history you get to, the straight is just the French state is just structurally anti-black. Like it is so unfathomably racist. And, the way this sort of plays out in Algeria, right, is like they hold on to Algeria for 130 years. But one of the sort of products of this, right, is that, okay, so like Algeria is now part of just like the French Empire, effectively, right? And this means that over the sort of decades, the French government starts like importing Algerian like workers into France because, okay, so one of the French carry out basically like a series of genocidal campaigns where they just like progressive different French regimes like steal more and more of the land that anyone ever in Algeria had until you get to a point where Algeria is just effectively a French settler colony. And so, okay, so they've displaced all these people and they start, recruiting them to go work in France. But this becomes a huge problem for the French state because, now they have a bunch of colonized people in France who they need to like keep colonized. And in order to do this, you get you get Foucault's boomerang, right? Where you have these French police that are trained in Algeria who are used like against Algerians in France. And, I've said it like, it's not just that it's used against Algerians, right? It's used against like people from all over the sort of French Empire, from like Northwest Africa, even people who were from Haiti, who like wound up in France. But this comes to a head in 1961 when there's just one of the weirder parts of French history is there's like a second coup attempt where all of these officers, these French officers in Algeria are like terrified. The French people had voted to like, that could have led to Algerians getting the ability to like vote over like self-rule, right? And the French like colonial officers in Algeria go nuts over this and they try to overthrow the government and it fails. But the result of this is that de Gaulle gets like dictatorial powers in France for like 5 months. And in October of that year, the Algerian National Liberation Front, which is like this is like the giant sort of movements of the like of the Algerian anti-colonial movement. Like they have this giant protest in Paris, and the police just start shooting them. I mean, this is like this is not a riot, right? Like this is just like they have a giant peaceful march. The police start just killing them. They kill several hundred Algerian protesters. They throw their corpses into the Seine. I'm gonna read this quote from the BBC. One photo captured the chilling sentiment of the time, showing graffiti scrawled along a section of the Seine's embankment saying, "Here we drown Algerians." And they kill like at least 200 people, probably more than that. They're throwing like children into the river to try to drown them. It is fucking awful. And the French government, like, they deny that this happened for decades. The first, this massacre is in 1961, right? The first like French prime minister or French president to admit that this happened, did it in like I think it was 2011. It was 50 years later that the first French politician like admitted they did it, and the government has still never apologized for this. So this is what the French police are, right? Like they are these people. They are, they're the people who, like, a bunch of Algerians did a protest for independence and they killed. They threw their children's corpses into a river. And this is the sort of long range backdrop of like everything that's happening in modern France like today, right? Is the fact that like France was an empire, still like is in a lot of ways an empire, and their police are just like unfathomably violent and racist.
I mean, yeah, I think I might say like if you're American, pretty fathomably violent and racist.
Yeah.
but yeah, like it is. Yeah, I think that's a fair summary.
Like,
yeah.
If there was ever a reasonable society on Earth that people could live in, it would be very easy to go, this is the most racist thing you've ever seen. But unfortunately, we all live in hell world. And, you know, so our metrics are like, is like, have the Brazilian police killed more people per capita than the American police?
Yeah,
like,
again, it's one of these, like, we don't need to litigate this. Like, I think the point is that when people kind of, like, flip out over these images of buildings being lit on fire and shit getting broken and, you know, people shooting out cameras or even, like, beating folks, you know, in the street as part of a riot and freak out about, you know, how the place has gone to hell. Like violence that exceeds that by many factors has been like the norm for segments of French society going back as long as the United States has existed.
Yeah.
So, you know, like the ugliness that you see in the moment of the riot is not like it like focusing on that and ignoring what's caused it, like why people have been like reached a pitch where they're doing stuff like that is kind of an error at least in like historical analysis, and I think also an error in terms of like the severity of what we're looking at. Like none like all of the ugly shit that's happened, because at least one person was killed by rioters and all this, but like all of the ugliness of this current set of riots doesn't compare to one boat sinking in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Like, and that those things are very much tied together. You know, France has had a significant role in why Northern Africa is the way it is right now. And why large chunks of like that continent have endured waves of successive starvation, famine, death, war. Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Like, you know, I want to just briefly talk about Vietnam for a little bit, because
sure,
I think something that like people don't really understand is that, like, okay, so right at like both in the 30s in Vietnam and sort of through World War II, like huge portions of the country were starving. And they were starving because the French had completely fucked their economy and was taking all of the food and was taking all of the resources. And like, you know, like that's, you know, that's a big part of the reason why the original sort of like war in Vietnam that the French fight happens, right? It's why people like drive them out, is that there are like just innumerable people who just fucking starve and die because the French colonialists were just like, fuck you. And, you know, like the French Empire, it doesn't get as much attention as like the British or the Spanish or like the Americans, but it was like incomprehensibly inhuman in terms of just like the shit that they did. And fuck them. They lost Dien Bien Phu. They'll lose again.
Well, yeah, I think we should note when it comes to like the violence of the French police, when we're talking about how they are very American in the way they do violence, that is reflected in the statistics. The French police are the deadliest police force in continental Europe.
Yeah.
Part of why is that recent law that was passed in 2017, which made it a lot easier for French police to be able to fire their weapons, specifically at people they think might be about to commit a serious crime. Part of the reason for the change in the law was the the Charlie Hebdo mass shootings.
Yeah.
There was just this like belief that, because 2 police officers were killed in that, and there was this kind of belief among segments of the population that maybe if the police had been able to be more aggressive, they would have responded more successfully to the shooting. I think the existence of the American police and the number of mass shootings we have might argue against that. But that's one of the things people will say is why this shooting happened. And it is
I think it's worth noting the effect of that law. That law, like, it more than doubled the average number of very, very specifically, like the number of like North and West African people who, like French people who get shot by the police, doubled And
yes,
and depending on the year, right, it either doubled or in some cases almost tripled.
Yeah,
right.
It's been extremely stark, the change. It's also worth noting that in 2005 we had a huge set of riots in the suburbs of Paris. I think it killed one person, and the riots were sparked as the result of police were chasing two kids. I believe they were Algerian French kids. And they wound up like hiding from the police inside of a building that was part of like one of the trains and got electrocuted.
Yeah, they were. I think what it was is that they were like trying to like go home, and they decided to cut through like a construction site, and someone called the police on them, and so they ran away from the police. And so I've heard different versions of this.
And I don't think we're ever going to know precisely what occurred. Yeah.
Like there was a version that was circulating at the time and now that might be true, but I don't know about. But there's a version of it that says that like the police stood there and watched these kids get electrocuted. And that's possible. I don't know if that happened, but like
a lot of people certainly believed that had happened. And so, and it was not obviously the death of these kids, as is always the case when you have riots this big, was sort of helped to catalyze existing feelings. One of the things that was sort of one of the reasons why people were angry was that Muslims in France at this point in time had essentially zero representation. In 2005, Islam was France's second most popular religion after Catholicism. There were 7 million French citizens of Arab or African origin. They had no representation in the National Assembly. Not a single member of the National Assembly was a Muslim or even Arab or African in their descent. So there was literally no representation. They were targeted by the police. These kids die a suspicious death, and people riot like motherfuckers, you know? It was a pretty good set of riots.
Yeah, it was that one. The 2005 ones, I can pull up some of the stats on it. Before I want to go back a bit to the 80s.
Yeah, I think I've got some right here, actually. Yeah, at least... I
think they burned 10,000 cars.
Yeah.
Multiple police stations, government ministries, like city halls.
Yeah, 230 public buildings damaged. Yeah. So it was... They went pretty hard.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, this is something they said at the time. This was the biggest, like, unrest in France since 1968.
And it is worth noting some of the differences between the government's reaction to the riots we just had and to the 2005 riots. In 2005, the Interior Minister of France, Nicolas Sarkozy, called the people involved in the riots scum who needed to be got rid of.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, it was pretty ugly, and there was sort of immediate like defense of the police force for their actions. It's been a bit different in this most recent case. For one thing, Emmanuel Macron immediately like said that the shooting was horrible, like the actions of the police were bad, which got the police very angry at him.
Yeah.
Camera footage of the shooting then came out and made it very clear that this was an execution as opposed to a complicated situation. Which isn't to like overly defend Macron and the administration. But you can see just how things have changed in France politically.
I think the other thing that's going on there is that Macron is just a way weaker government than the French government was in like 2005, right? Like one of the things, one of the things I was looking at was, in 2005, the French deployed 11,000 police to try to contain it, and they kind of didn't. But in like the stuff that happened like 2 weeks ago, there were 45,000 police deployed. So this is, I think, like it gets to like the severity of what's happening and how scared the French state is of it, because, like the current French government is not very stable. They've been trying to like, this is like the 5th round of like riots that they've seen in the last like 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is also evidence that like the police, who have largely gotten what they wanted from the government over the last 17 years or so, have not succeeded in at all reducing the severity, and in fact have continued to spark these kind of riots.
The other thing that's going on here, right? So partially it's because the French police are like unbelievably racist.
Yeah.
The other thing that's going on here is this sort of, I mean, I guess you could call it like the long range crisis of capitalism, right? Like youth unemployment in the suburbs is 45%. And this is the kind of thing that caused the Arab Spring, right? It was like, you know, you have all of these populations who are just structurally unemployed, right? There's no jobs for them. What they, you know, like they what jobs they can get are like these just awful, like, you know, like Americans are familiar with dog shit service sector jobs, right? Like it's that kind of stuff. And, you know, and this is a product of a lot of sort of long range, like political trends, right? It's, you know, like capitalism is spitting people out of the social system. The other thing that I think is really important about these protests is that like the kids in the suburbs are like not really connected to the French left. And there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is this movement that happened in 1981. So in 1981, we got really the first of this kind of riots. So, you know, these suburbs were like mostly these like housing developments, I guess, were mostly built like in the 70s to accommodate like a new flow of migrant workers mostly from Algeria, from other places too. And in 1981, you get the first of these riots. And French society is like, holy shit, because there's a bunch of non-white people rioting and they lose their minds. And after the first set of riots, the thing that's, I think, interesting about this too is the initial riots aren't that big. Like they're like pretty small compared to like what has come after, compared to stuff that's happening now.
Riot technology was in its infancy at that point.
It's not okay, that's slightly unfair. Like people in France in that period were pretty good at rioting. It's just that like these ones, it wasn't as bad as it was gonna get. And part of the reason it gets that bad is so the first after the first of these riots, there's an attempt by the French left to like organize these people, and they have this thing called the Beur movement. I don't know, it's French, it's BUR.
I think we've all established that we're not going to be impressing anyone with the level of our understanding of the French language.
Yeah, hey, look. But so they had this sort of anti-racism movement, and you know they carry out a 100,000 person march from Marseille to Paris. But the problem is this movement starts to like fail almost immediately and starts to fall apart because, you know, at this point Mitterrand, he's like on and off again as the French prime minister for a lot of the 80s, and Mitterrand's from the Socialist Party, and his plan for this is to attempt to co-opt this movement and to turn all of these people who live in the suburbs into a new voter base for the French Socialist Party. But the problem with this is that instead of, you know, okay, so Mitterrand does some reforms kind of to like put money into these communities, but like, again, these people are being structurally disenfranchised by a combination of sort of French racism, like the physical urban geography of these suburbs, like just capitalism in general, and you know these are sort of like macro forces. And Mitterrand's plan to stop the riots is he has these summer music festivals that like hire unemployed youth that go by the name, and I'm not making this up, SOS Racisme. SOS racism. They're just like, yeah, this is our plan to solve the riots. We're just gonna have like these like
good work, guys,
music concerts.
No, I think you got it. I think you got it.
This kind of works for a little bit.
There was apparently a fun version, like a better version of that occurred in Oregon in like, I think it was the 1980s when they were going to have like a Republican convention in town. And so the state governor, I think McCall was his last name, was like, okay, I'm going to throw a big like music festival, like 2 hours south of Portland. And I'm going to tell the cops not to bust people for drugs. But yeah, Different thing. Yeah.
Yeah, this thing, the problem with this thing is again, like the point of this is not actually to sort of solve the sort of structural racism of French society or do anything about capitalism. It's to build a voter base for the Socialist Party. And, after a couple of years of this, the people in this movement, like the actual kids in the suburbs are like, what the fuck? Like, our lives still suck shit. Like, you guys haven't changed anything. And there's a lot of promises the French Socialist Party breaks. One of the important ones is that the French Socialist Party had been promising to let immigrants vote in local elections, and that just fucking vanished. Right? This has never happened. This is part of why there's so little representation in the French government, and the actual sort of broader goals of this anti-racism movement, it fails. And there's an undocumented workers movement that sort of splinters off from it, but it's completely destroyed by the French business class. And, France in this period still has some very strong unions. And the unions just were like, no, fuck you, like die. And just told them to fuck off. And from there, and from the betrayal of the Socialist Party, and also simultaneously, the other thing that's happening in the 80s is the rise of sort of like these the French New Right is like resurgent. These guys, when I say the French New Right, these people are like fucking neo-Nazis, right? Like very, 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 a bunch of very famous French neo-Nazis who modern neo-Nazis read appear in this period. And they start there's a bunch of anti-immigrant murders that are just horrible. But the state is just kind of gone like, whatever, like, fuck it, you guys can die. And so, this has a massive impact on the culture of these suburbs and, what kind of political possibilities they have, because these people, like to this day, you will get people talking about the Great Betrayal and how they got fucked by the Socialist Party. And so these people they have very little contact mostly with the mainstream French left. The mainstream French left is, especially the center left, is really fucking racist. Even the Communist Party is really fucking, and part of what was happening here too is the 80s is the period where the Communist Party collapses. And, and so all of the sort of the organized left factions, don't like them. The unions are like, what the fuck are these Algerians? Like, fuck them. They're Muslim. We hate them. And so the legacy of this is that the government does some welfare policies and they try to do some job creation a little bit, but this was always just doomed to fail because these are, what France in this period is deindustrializing. And so the product of this is you have all of these people who are now just unemployed, who were attempted, there was an attempt to integrate them into the left, and the left just fucked them. But, obviously they're not going to go to the right because the right hates them even more than the French left does. And you get these, and what happens is these people, these masses of precariously employed or unemployed immigrants become this massive focus of the French state. And when conservatives take over in the 90s, they use them as this racist scapegoat for every problem. They begin this massive authoritarian campaign against Black and Muslim people. And we're in the US, right? We know what that looks like. And, and one of the other things that starts to happen is the French state and the French right portray all these people. So the 80s is also the period this is right after the Iranian Revolution. There's this rising fear of Islamism, and the way that the state responds to this is basically by going, well, all these people are like Islamist terrorists. We hate them. All of the jobs programs that had been set up and all of the welfare programs disappear. The funding for the music concerts even just vanishes. And all of this stuff is happening particularly intensely in the early 2000s. And that's the other context that leads up to the 2005 riots, is that by 2005, people who are living in these places have seen really serious deteriorations in their standards of living in the last 4 years, because these programs are just being destroyed. And, and you get these protests that start in 2005. And there's another very similar thing that happens in 2007 when the police crash into two kids on a police car crashes into two kids on a motorcycle and kill them. And there's a smaller but very, very intense series of riots. And then it's kind of weirdly quiet for a bit. And, I might say quiet. Okay, it's been quiet from the rioting end. The French police keep killing people. One of the things that people are talking about in this one is in 2017, it came out that the French police just fucking raped a teenager and it's fucking horrible. Yeah, and that I think leads us kind of into the sort of modern, like the thing that's happening right now, which is that, you know, like the kids who are rioting in the street, and I think this is a big part of the reason why it's this intense, is that, you know, these are like 17 and 18-year-olds, right? They're old, and they're too old to believe in this sort of like fairy tales of French liberty and equality, right? They know what that looks like. They know that it's like French liberty and equality means a police baton fucking breaking your skull because you were walking down the street, right? But they're also, you know, they're 17 or 18. They're too young to know that they're supposed to be afraid. And because of that, they have, you know, like they burned down multiple police stations. Like it's the rioting has been just incredibly intense.
One of the things that has probably been the major touchstone people have heard about these riots on social media and stuff is or at least the thing that I saw being spread the most was like the fact that rioters were using firearms. There's a couple of things that like I noticed. One was people flipping out over like the presence of guns in France. And interestingly, folks on both sides of this, I think, got stuff wrong because people, on one hand, you had people being like, where the fuck did they get guns? Something suspicious must have happened. They must have come in from Ukraine because France is a European country and European countries don't have guns in the civilian population. Like, yes, they do. Yeah. France actually, interestingly enough, France is one of those countries that primarily regulates who is allowed to own what kinds of guns, as opposed to what kinds of guns can be owned. So in France, with the right licensing, you can own most of the kinds of firearms that you can own in the United States. In fact, in France, if you have the proper kinds of permits, you can own something like an AR-15 with a 30-round magazine, which you could not purchase in the state of California. Now, these are still very stringent gun control. If you're going to have, because again, they split the kinds of firearms into category, and the most restricted kind of firearms are semi-automatic rifles like AR platform guns. If you're going to have something like that, you're doing an intense background check. You're doing you're submitting to random searches, you know, by the police. Like it's not nearly as easy as it is to acquire firearms in the U.S., but there are quite a lot of firearms. I think you're allowed to own up to like 10 magazines per gun and 1,000 rounds or something like that. That said, I don't believe the majority of the guns that we've seen on the streets in the riots are normal, legal, civilian-owned arms. That said, the existence of guns in these protests has also been heavily overstated, largely a result of footage of shit like people shooting out cameras with what are actually air rifles that folks just assume are real firearms. There's also been shit like there was one video that went really viral that was a petrol bomb being set off by protesters at a government building. And it was just blue checks on Twitter. People who pay Elon for it were spreading it saying, look, people are using RPGs in the riots.
Yeah,
you know, rioters have rocket launchers. These are, and some, there were a number of folks who got tens of thousands of shares and likes claiming that these were examples of like heavy weaponry from Ukraine getting over to the US. For one thing, if weaponry was getting out of Ukraine, RPGs are not like the thing that people would be psyched to get. You can get RPGs in Europe, and you're generally getting them from North Africa, right? Like, or from the Balkans. You know, there's no shortage of comm block weaponry in that part of the country, but it was not an RPG being used.
And this is something I want to talk about a little bit, is that the actual thing, the actual weapon of the French rioters is fire. And this is something they are way better at this than the Americans are, right? Like, I mean, I saw a video
absolutely
of, I saw a couple of videos that were just wild. Like, there's some, I don't even know how they did this. Someone had set like one of those like skyscraper tall construction cranes on fire, and not the bottom of it, right? They set the cabin on fire. It's like, I don't even know how you do that, because like did they climb up the thing? Like did they set it on fire and then climb down while it was on fire? Like how do you even do that? I saw another video that was unbelievably funny where a bunch of protesters like in front of the mayor of their town covered his car in gasoline and lit it on fire, which was very funny. But you know, this is the thing, like,
fire is area denial, right? Like that's key. Like,
Yeah,
you're able to
it's areas
close
now,
down
and-
avenues of advance. You're able to protect your flanks.
And also it is a very, very good way to, like, it is a very, very, if the thing you want to do is destroy a police station, like, lighting it on fire is a very, very good way to do that. And, you know, it's very effective at, like, destroying cars too, is the other thing. I think
Absolutely. Enough of it, sure.
yeah, and like, the other thing that's been happening is there's been a lot of looting, but this is, I actually think, the most depressing part about these entire riots is that most of the looting, you know, like, I am pro looting. This is like one of my stances, right? But like there is a lot of looting that is people looting high end goods that they normally just would never have access to, right? That's not what's happening here. Most of the looting that's happening here is food and medicine.
Yeah.
And that is the most depressing thing. The fact that people are doing subsistence looting is, like, maybe the most depressing thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Like,
yeah. Subsistence
I
looting
Jesus
is a bleak
Christ.
concept.
Oh God.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, you know? Like,
yeah, and like the last, like, you know, it's the cost of living crisis, just like, and again, the fact that, like, we're talking about places with 45% youth unemployment, right? Like, it's, the conditions are so unbelievably bleak that, like, yeah, I mean, like, this is what happens when you do this to people, is, like, they fight back. The other thing I want to talk about is that a lot of these people are, like, one of the things that people focus on is, I actually think is very funny. There was a guy interviewed in the New York Times who had, like, the moderate position on the riots, and their moderate position on the riots was, it's okay that they're burning police stations, but why are they burning schools? And I want to talk about the burning schools thing a little bit, because this is something that gets talked about a lot. And, you know, okay, like, this is, you know, this is a sort of sociological question that because this is like, burning schools has been a thing that's, like, this happened in 2005, happened in 2007, even going back to some of the riots in the 80s and 90s, people were burning schools. And the reason these kids are burning schools, right, is that most of the people who are burning these schools are, like, there were kids who went to these schools, right? And, you know, they were either in these schools or they just got out and they realized these schools didn't do shit, right? Like, going to one of these schools doesn't lift you out of poverty. Studying hard doesn't lift you out of poverty. You're fucked. And, you know, and so, like, yeah, of course, like, of course these people are lighting their schools on fire, right? They're attacking, they're attacking, like, the actual French, like, institutions that were systematically set up to fuck them. And one of the other, like, you know, and like, one of the things that people always talk about is, like, well, why are you, you know, this you get this with American riots too. People ask, like, why are you burning your homes? Like, why are you burning your own community? And I mean, particularly with the French suburbs, right? Like, these suburbs are a cage. They were built as a cage. They were built specifically as a cage to contain a bunch, like, as France's way of containing this non-white labor force that they imported into the country. And so, you know, and it's like, yeah, and every single day the bars of the cage are shrinking, right? The cage is shrinking, the walls are getting tighter and tighter. There's less food, there's less money, there's less opportunities. And yeah, you know, at some point people start burning down the cage. And everyone just is, like, walking around going, why are you burning your cage down? It's your home, but it's still a cage. Like, the fact that people are made to live in the cage doesn't make it any less a cage. And that's why these people are burning it, because they know from, you know, just the experience of their everyday lives of what it's like to live here, that this place is fucking killing them. And so, you know, they responded in sort of the classic French fashion, which is to light it on fire.
It is, look, if the goal was to integrate these people into French culture, there's an extent to which
it works,
you know, yeah, absolutely.
Like,
there you go. You know,
you created like
the beauty of globalization.
Best writers in all of France. Like,
yeah, I again, like, in terms of the people flipping out about stuff, like, I think it is important to think about, to keep in mind why people are doing this, how bad a situation has to be for people to, as you said, like, burned their homes down around themselves. Like, when you think about, like, looting as a function of basic survival, like, that's the degree to which these people have been, like, stretched out. And the fact that people are freaking out over shit like guns. And it's largely, honestly, when I talk about that, largely the reason why is because there's a whole ecosystem of mainly largely right-wing people, like media influencers, a lot of whom got blue checks as soon as Elon offered it because it puts them up higher in the search results, who started making money in 2020 posting riot porn from the United States and who are desperate to return to those days. So anytime there's disturbances anywhere, they're going to try to what is the most, a lot of folks on the far left and a lot of folks on the right are angry at, the US for sending weapons to Ukraine. Well, let's blame this on that. Or, I want to make some sort of point about gun control and pretend that French gun control laws, don't work because some of the rioters have old shotguns or AKs that got smuggled in from across the Mediterranean. So I'm going to make it about that. But all of which is, number one, calculated in order to increase the profit of a specific kind of dishonest media influencer, and all of which ignores the humanity of people who are in a desperate situation and acting desperately as a result.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that really pisses me off about this is that it obscures the actual parts of this that are interesting. And that are, that are genuinely radical in ways that I don't like. One of the things that the people tried to do in this was people tried to break their friends who'd been arrested by the French state out of prison. And they ended up failing because, and this is one of the other things that's been happening is lots of countries have police anti-terrorism units, right? The French have multiple kinds of them. They also have military police units, but the French were using these specifically anti-terrorism units against the protesters. And that's one of the units that got deployed. I'm pretty sure if the sources I've been reading are correct, that was one of the things that happened in this was they sent an anti-terrorism unit to stop a prison break. And that's, I think, it's a really sort of emblematic thing of what the French state is and where it's going, right? It's the French Republic was born from a bunch of people trying to storm a prison. And it has now gotten back to a bunch of people trying to storm a prison, and they send a bunch of fucking anti-terrorism police after them.
Some of these weird right-wingers were like, look, this is what happens when you let all these foreigners into your country that destroy the culture. I'm like, man, there's not a goddamn thing more French than attacking a prison. Than attacking your own prison. That is the most these people have literally returned to tradition.
Yeah, they've become French royalists again. It's just oh God, inshallah they suffer the same fate.
Anyway, whatever. It's very frustrating. The way in which we're seeing kind of. I think I don't know. We'll see. I probably shouldn't be such a doomer because I don't actually know the extent to which all that worked for the kind of people who were attempting to grapple and wrestle these riots into something that could make them quick cash. Yeah. But it is kind of a reminder that those people are still there, that infrastructure of deceit still exists. And every time, the next time there's big riots or protests here, every time it happens anywhere, that shit is all going to spin up. I will say in terms of stuff that worked, the use of pellet guns to take out cameras seemed to have been extremely effective.
Oh, I should. Okay, there's another thing I should talk about that doesn't show up on film much for obvious reasons. But one of the most effective things that was happening in these riots was people using cars to break down the fronts of stores. Yeah, and the second one that was very effective was people using there was a lot of use of scooters as a way to get move around really quickly, as a way to redeploy, as a way to okay, the thing about these protests that is really sort of interesting in a lot of ways is it's what they've basically done, not from a sort of anarchist ideological perspective, but from an organizational perspective, is that they've created a bunch of networks of affinity groups. And so the way this stuff is happening is you get a very small group of people who are capable of moving very quickly, and they just go do a thing. Right. They don't tell anyone else what they're doing. There's no sort of there's no sort of top down central command that you can just sort of stop. Right. It's this incredibly sort of decentralized it's this incredibly sort of decentralized movement. And the police just it took them like a week, like over like about to like really like take back control of these places. And, and like right now with the period we're entering is like a period that we saw right after the George Floyd uprisings, which is like, this is the period where like the police cracks down and like tries to arrest a bunch of people.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, like, I don't see a world where we don't see another one of these in the next like 5, maybe 10 years, because none of the structural problems are like all of the structural problems with the French state are just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And at some point, someone is like I think the problem with this and the problem with the French movement in general has been for the last about 20 years, right? There have been a lot of very, very similar sort of riots trying to bring down governments, and they mostly don't work. But at some point, someone is going to figure out something, and they are going to do it. And France, like, could well be a place where that happens, just because the state's capacity to do violence is, the state's legitimacy is just purely reduced to its capacity for violence. And I don't know, that's not great, but I mean, it's what's happening. And I don't know. I hope someone beats them, and I hope the people that beat them are better than the current pack of murderous jackals.
Speaking of other things that are like a long and proud tradition in French politics.
Yeah. Like there is nothing more French than overthrowing the French government.
That's not just French, right?
Racism.
That's like everywhere where you're like, wow, these people suck. I hope they get overthrown, and also not by someone worse.
Yeah. Like, no more Napoleons.
No more Napoleons. Napoleon's Bonaparte. That's the plural. All right. Well, I feel like, are we, is that us for today?
Yeah, I think that's been our riots.
All right. That's been our French riots episode, everybody. Until next time, I don't know, maybe acquire and train with a pellet gun, They're easy to get, surprisingly effective, legally not firearms,
And you can look, thing they're very useful for if there's like small animals that are like trying to eat your fucking garden.
Yep, you can use them on that as well. Small animals or the government.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Let's talk about modern home shopping. It's sort of become a fun side hobby, right? Scrolling listings at night, dreaming about kitchens you've never seen, or backyards you haven't even stepped foot in, all from the comfort of pretty much anywhere. Redfin knows a lot of people like you want to own, but are stuck in this browsing mode loop. That's where Redfin flips the script. With listings that update within minutes and tours you can book right from the Redfin app, you can see your dream home the moment it appears. Now, liking a listing is easy, but actually landing it, that's where Redfin comes in. Redfin has over 2,200 agents with local expertise. And Redfin agents close twice as many deals as other agents. That means they want to help you win, not just window shop. Redfin is built to help you go from just looking to wait, this could actually be home. So become the newest neighbor on the block. Visit redfin.com to start finding and start owning. That's redfin.com.
Time for a sofa upgrade? Introducing Anabay Sofas, where designer style meets budget-friendly prices. Anabay brings you the ultimate in furniture innovation with a modular design that allows you to rearrange your space effortlessly. Perfect for both small and large spaces, Anabay is the only machine-washable sofa inside and out. Say goodbye to stains and messes with liquid and stain-resistant fabrics that make cleaning easy. Liquid simply slide right off. Designed for custom comfort, our high-resilience foam lets you choose between a sink-in feel or a supportive memory foam blend. Plus, our pet-friendly, stain-resistant fabrics ensure your sofa stays beautiful for years. Don't compromise quality for price. Visit WashableSofas.com to upgrade your living space today. Sofas start at just $699 with no risk returns and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Get up to 60% off plus free shipping and free returns. Shop now at WashableSofas.com. Offers are subject to change and certain restrictions may apply.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to It Could Happen Here. I'm Robert Evans, and this is a podcast about things falling apart. And nowhere, showcases collapse quite as well as the U.S.-Mexico border. And that's my little introduction. Now I'm going to pivot over to James Stout. James, what are we talking about today?
Well, today we are talking about the U.S.-Mexico border, specifically in the great state of Texas. Which people might remember from its winter power grid failures, its upcoming summer power grid failures, and Greg Abbott's sort of hilarious and also very cruel and terrible antics on the border. And we're joined today by two guests we've had before to talk about the border on the podcast. We've got Jen Budd, a former senior Border Patrol agent, an author, and an activist, and Mariana Trevino Wright, who people remember as the butterfly lady, the previous owner of an M4 assault rifle, the lady who made the cop walk off her butterfly sanctuary once, and a hero occasionally of Twitter.com. How are you guys?
We're good. Good to see you guys.
That is nice to hear, because this is normally the time of year where Texas is rough climactically, and this particular year it's downright apocalyptic down there.
Yeah, we just don't go outside. You're likely to vaporize spontaneously.
Yeah, it looks bad. Yeah. So what I've gathered us here today to discuss is the upcoming implementation of a floating border wall, a barrier which is going to make children drown. I don't really know how to describe it. Perhaps one of you could sort of describe this proposed. Greg Abbott's talking about it, but it's clearly like not just a state thing. So perhaps we could start out by explaining exactly what he's been talking about, what this design looks like.
So the floating border wall, I confess in the beginning, I was kind of like, I don't get it, because I'm thinking a wall, extending upwards. But essentially what it is are these giant buoys, plastic buoys, that are very tightly woven together so that you can't go in between them. And then the buoys also spin. So if you grab onto them, you're going to just spin down. And then underneath the buoys is 4 feet of netting. So if you try and swim underneath it, you will be captured in the netting, and then you will likely drown. It's originally, I think the original design for the makers was to prevent groups like Greenpeace and so forth from getting to oil, oil stands out in the middle of the ocean and keep their boats from getting to them. So now they're going to use them and string them, because the border technically, most Americans I don't think know this, the border technically along a lot of parts of the Rio Grande in Texas is in the middle of the river, depending on where the river's flowing that year. And so they will have to also be weighted down as well. And the hope for the governor is that most of the people will drown trying to get over to the U.S. side, which means their bodies will remain in Mexico, and then we won't have to deal with them.
Jesus.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, that is a particularly dark consideration I hadn't thought of. Our border is already, if people aren't familiar with Decolonial Atlas, they have some good visualizations, but you can see where migrants die. They have one, I think it's called Where Migrants Die. And there are various sort of colors for different people dying from exposure, people dying from dehydration, drowning, and overwhelmingly, people don't die on the way here. They die within a few miles of our southern border, normally on the northern side. So, like, our border is already, and Jen has covered this extensively, how our border is already killing people. But this is, I think, particularly cruel. Is it something that, like, Abbott started talking about it maybe a month or so ago, maybe 2 months ago now? Is it something that he's doing sort of his own, like the Arizona sort of container wall, or is it something that he's proposing as a sort of federal operation? What's going on with?
I think he originally probably got the idea because in the Trump administration, they had promoted this. And so I believe that the former chief under Trump, Rodney Scott, they were probably researching it. Him and CBP were researching how to do this because it would take at least quite a few months, if not years, to research this and make something like this happen.
Yeah.
But I think that they abandoned that because they know that that's just not going to fly federally. But although, why wouldn't it? I mean, all deterrence policies are based on this kind of cruelty. So I guess visually they thought it would be too much. But since Rodney Scott is no longer the chief of the Border Patrol and he resigned, he's been working with the state of Texas and specifically with Governor Greg Abbott to develop new policies and so forth. And he's been down there helping the union and helping other ex-Border Patrol agents come up with new policies and new cruelties for Greg Abbott to install. So I think originally the idea was a federal idea, and now it's come down to the state of Texas.
Okay. So I guess how far along is the state of Texas in? Like, I know before Trump built his border wall, we had these little 30-foot prototypes in San Diego, and he gave a lot of contracts to people who'd given him a lot of money in his election campaign. Wheatland Tube, I think, is the big one, and it makes steel. But how far is the state of Texas along in its plan to create a floating murder barrier?
The buoy border barrier, is already created. And it's available in various lengths. And I should add, in addition to the buoys, in between the buoys are spinning radial blades. So it just, I mean, every aspect of this.
How can I miss that?
Is a bloody nightmare.
Yeah.
I went to the manufacturer site and it addresses this too. So you can't even get to like the middle of the buoy with, something and cut the string of buoys because there are these radial razor blades too.
Cool.
So the state will be deploying it in 1,000-foot strips. And Jen and I did a little podcast on this a couple of months ago, when we first saw these signs appearing on the river. And they were super strange. It was Memorial Day weekend, I believe. And they were numbered. And they said like RGV for Rio Grande Valley, RGV 191, 192, 193. We thought, are these mile markers like we have on the freeway? But they weren't at any particular distance. And they were put at various spots that appeared as though they could be areas where migrants cross. They can also be the paths where the cows and the horses come down to drink. Jen's been on the river with us. She's observed that at various platforms on the river where water pump stations are for farmers and irrigation districts and such. So we saw these signs. The RGV 191 is facing the river, facing Mexico. The backside of it is a caution, danger, risk of drowning sign in English and in Spanish, but it is facing the United States on the bank of the Rio Grande River in the United States. So it's in no way a caution to anyone who might be approaching the river. And we thought, why are they suddenly putting up these signs? Because forever, people have been crossing the river, and Border Patrol is on the boats there, Texas DPS, the Coast Guard, the U.S. Coast Guard, now game wardens, now Florida Highway Patrol and Florida Fish and Game and all these. I mean, it is everybody's floating the river now, not for recreation, but hunting migrants. And so then we thought, well, maybe these are so that when these out-of-state interlopers, and at times even the militia who show up to help them, could easily communicate with the authorities. Say I'm at marker number 191 or whatever. Then it was just a few days after that the announcement of this floating border buoy barrier came up. And my guess is the markers will be used to determine where those are deployed, where they get moved, and that sort of thing, so that then they can be accounted for.
Right. So are they proposing the entirety of the river be covered by this thing, or are they going to move segments of it to areas where they think it's a high traffic area?
They're going to begin in Eagle Pass, where 4 people drowned just this weekend. But then, according to Steve McGraw, who's head of Texas DPS, it sounds like they will be putting them all along the river in areas they believe are high traffic.
Right. Yeah. And Jesus Christ, it is the darkest thing. And yeah, Eagle Pass is where all those people died in the unair conditioned trailer, like I think 2 years ago, right? Was that Eagle Pass?
Those kind of trailer horrors have happened near us in Falfurrias and San Antonio. Unfortunately, they happen throughout the border region. And there are so many ports of entry, land ports of entry along the Texas-Mexico border, because Mexico is our number one trading partner with the U.S. And we have NAFTA, which established the North American Free Trade Zone. So if you have a television or a refrigerator, or you drive a car in the United States today, chances are those pieces and parts are manufactured in Mexico, in the free trade zone, and then they get brought over by truck. Same thing with so much of our produce. So the amount of that trailer traffic is enormous, and those trailers are used for human smuggling at much higher numbers, we should note, than the river area.
Yeah.
Same as for narcotics trafficking. Those things are coming across by the truckload and in shipping vessels, not in small bundles across the Rio Grande River.
Right. Yeah. I think most narcotics enter the country through ports of entry rather than between ports of entry. Jen's nodding.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the narcotics that are very expensive. Even when I was an agent in the mid-90s, I used to say, why do we only get marijuana? And the agents would say, well, because cocaine's too expensive to put on somebody's back and hike it through the mountains or across a river or in the desert. So it's just easier to buy off a CBP agent or a Border Patrol agent and just get waved on through.
Yeah, they're not like dumb. Otherwise, like these are huge money businesses. You're not throwing $500,000 of cocaine on some guy's back.
Yeah.
Right. And risking it floating away in the Rio Grande River. I mean,
this is valuable merchandise. Like they're no more cavalier with it than like Target is, like.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Obviously, this is part of a sort of larger. I don't know. Abbott does a lot of posturing on the border, right? And that posturing has real consequences for migrants, and it has real consequences for people living on both sides of the border as well, right? Especially, I think people who have listened to our previous coverage of that will be very well aware of that. Perhaps we could sort of characterize this within the context of Operation Lone Star, within the other. Like you've said, right, the other deployments, it's not just even Texas National Guard who are now deployed to the border. So could you give us like an overview of all the ridiculous LARPing that's being done?
Well, there are 12 or 13 states to date that have sent prison guards, their National Guard, fish and game or wildlife officers, and state police to the border. And this is related to, two different campaigns basically by the Border Patrol Union. One is Biden Border Crisis with that hashtag, which they launched in March of 2021. And the other is Every State is a Border State, which was a battle cry for MAGA politicians during the midterms. And so what we see now are these red states with governors who want to capitalize on looking tough on immigration, sending reinforcements to the border. DeSantis obviously was the first to do that because he's been very vocal about envying Abbott and how Abbott had kind of a leg up on him in any campaign because Abbott got the border and Abbott got to, as you said, posture there and be, the new sheriff in town and, stepping in where Sleepy Joe is, not performing. But what we see in reality is Brandon Judd, who's the president of the National Border Patrol Council, was stuck to Trump. They were best buddies and basically campaigning together. And then Brandon Judd kind of fell away from Trump when he lost re-election and has become Greg Abbott's best buddy and press junket sidekick and helped stage the launch of Operation Lone Star, which, was like a 4th of July type parade with the tanks and the helicopters and the planes and the boats and the ATV agents and the horses, the whole 9 yards. And I think most people in the United States believe that Abbott is this renegade doing this all on his own. And what we see as the reality is it is a joint operation between the state government and the federal government, but the feds won't admit to it because of the optics. It's bad enough that Biden continued border wall construction, which most of his supporters opposed. Now he is working hand in glove with Abbott. And when I say our experience, what we see daily and what I have documented is U.S. Border Patrol working with Texas Department of Public Safety troopers and Operation Lone Star, Texas National Guardsmen, literally riding in the same vehicles together, responding to scenes, patrolling together. And at the Butterfly Center, we had Texas National Guard parked on the levee at our property, blocking our access back and forth. And I went and said, hey guys, this is our property and we have to have access to it during regular business hours for, my staff who are working here and our members and visitors who come to explore and enjoy. So I need y'all to move. I need you to move your Humvee so we can get back and forth. And I recorded this interaction, as I do all. And they said, ma'am, we don't take our orders from you. We take our orders from Border Patrol. And that was a revelation to me when this happened a couple of years ago. So I actually got on the phone with the patrol agent in charge, the highest ranking Border Patrol agent at the McAllen station. And I said, his name is Tony Crane. I said, Tony, you need to come out here and tell these guys to move. They're saying they'll only do it for you and they only take orders from you. And Tony drove out there to the Butterfly Center, to the levee, and instructed the National Guard to move their vehicle, and they did. And this is something we've seen over and over. And I now have in email Commander or Regional Director, rather, of Texas DPS, Victor Escalon, who the rest of the nation may know from the Uvalde tragedy.
Yeah.
I have email from him where he is invoking the federal statute that DPS claims gives them the authority to ignore our Fourth Amendment rights and enter private property without warrant as long as they're working with Border Patrol. And they are claiming that they are doing so at the request of the United States Attorney General, according to the federal statute.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and importantly, the federal government in any of its aspects isn't saying, no, this isn't true, or that they're working, like you say, hand in hand with these. And it's not even just a joint federal and state operation. I think it was South Dakota's deployment, was it, that was funded by a wealthy individual? The state didn't pay for it. I can't remember which Dakota it was, but yeah, it was funded by a wealthy donor who paid for it. And
yeah, whichever state Kristi Noem is in charge of, yes. And I believe that also happened in Kentucky or Tennessee. Same thing. Okay. It was a wealthy donor who funded their state National Guard deployment.
Yeah. And then perhaps, Jen, you could explain to people why it is so different if they believe they have these within 100 miles of the border, and then again within 25 miles of the border, so many of your fundamental rights don't apply. So could you explain how that works, and then how then if the National Guard see themselves as also having the ability to sort of waive the Fourth Amendment, what that would mean for the privacy of people living along the border?
In the United States Border Patrol Academy, so I went through the academy, and I started in June of 1995. So I can at least testify to that. They basically, I had a 4-year in law, so I knew a little basics about it. And then going to the academy, it was really kind of sad because they don't really teach you much of anything. They're just like, their rights are limited. We're allowed within 25 miles of the border by the law to go on anybody's private property and even search their buildings as long as it's not a domicile, and that can sometimes be in question. Whether it's being used as a domicile or we consider it as a domicile. And then within 100 miles of any land or sea border, which encompasses 2/3 of the United States population, we can basically stop you and ask you to prove that you're a United States citizen. And so then they increase that with checkpoints that are a little ways away from the border, where they, under the guise of asking for your citizenship, they then get to police American citizens or legal residents. And as the years have progressed, Border Patrol keeps trying to push those authorities. In the beginning, we weren't allowed to work with local PD, the local sheriffs. There was a very clear separation, a very clear line between Border Patrol and local cops, or at least legally on written paper there were supposed to be. And after 9/11, what we end up seeing is the Border Patrol decides to get very heavily invested into surveillance. And it's not a coincidence. Former Chief Rodney Scott was in charge of that during that time. And his basic statement was, if a car is bombed in Iraq, the Border Patrol needs to know about it. So they considered anything in the world to be important to the Border Patrol. And they wanted the Border Patrol to be the go-to agency in as far as surveillance. So that's why you see them being used in Black Lives Matter protests and things like this. And we saw them a lot in the Trump administration, where they were supposedly guarding federal buildings and then went and attacked them. So what you see is the Border Patrol trying to quietly eke into what is typically considered peace officer authority. So they're trying to get peace officer authority in Texas through the state legislature. And they just keep trying to expand their authority more and more. What I see in Texas specifically is, when you look at the history of immigration, when the United States, when we first, when Texas first became a state and all this other stuff, originally the states did their own immigration patrolling. And so if you went and you decided you're going to somehow you landed on the coast in Georgia, then you would have to go to a Georgian official and pay whatever it is that they required of you and stuff. And so what I see more and more is like Texas is taking back that authority and saying, we're the ones that are going to say this. And so then they can make money off of the deterrence policies and all of this other stuff. So it's just a constant expansion of the rights of the cops, while at the same time constantly reducing the rights to the people who live here and even the people that cross here. A lot of people think they'll say, that migrants don't have any constitutional rights. Well, that's not true. They have constitutional rights because it says people in the U.S. Constitution. It doesn't say citizens. So in certain areas, it will say citizens, and then that is exclusive to United States citizens. But the basic rights are afforded to even migrants, but because the migrants don't have much of a voice, the Border Patrol gets away with everything, secret teams, cover-up teams, and all this other stuff. Border Patrol agents will just flat out tell you, Constitution doesn't exist down here. And they never get in trouble for it. So
yeah.
One of the things Jen just touched on is Texas DPS getting in on this immigration business is when Governor Abbott declared that Operation Lone Star would be targeting Hispanic males, and in some places they talk about of fighting age. So they're already depicting all of these individuals as like soldiers in some invasion, in a gang war, in, that they're, again, hostile combatants to the United States. But they were going to charge them all with criminal trespass. So we hear a lot about how awful the cartel is and how much money they take from migrants and then hold them for ransom and how expensive it is to get across. Well, once they get across, the state of Texas becomes the cartel. They arrest them, charge them with criminal trespass, put them in the county jail. It's a $5,000 fine. Then when they're released from state custody, they're immediately handed over to federal detention. And that is generally the for-profit Geo Group or Core Civic. And there, my understanding is fines for detention can be $10,000 to $12,000 for your federal detention. And so here we have, it used to be just the for-profit federal detention facilities cashing in on our criminal immigration policies. And Governor Abbott's like, hey, why aren't we getting a piece of the pie? So that is what Operation Lone Star is really about. It's not about public safety. It's not that all this fentanyl is coming across the Rio Grande River, being smuggled by migrants. It's about cha-ching, 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 putting all of them in to the county jail at $5,000 a head.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all the while, right? Like I know some of the Texas National Guard people aren't getting the benefits they would normally get if they'd been mobilized or deployed because it's a state deployment, not a federal deployment. And as much as Abbott and DeSantis try and paint the border as a dangerous place full of drug warlords and cartel violence, overwhelmingly the people in Lone Star who have died because they got drunk and drove, because they had an accident with a personally owned firearm, because Texas law doesn't allow them to stop the National Guard bringing their own weapons.
They're not getting into gunfights with sicarios, right? Like it's not anything like that. It's the standard problem of taking a bunch of men away from the place they normally live and making them do mind-numbing duty.
And they're doing mind-numbing duty in, exasperating heat. It's boring as hell. We see them asleep in vehicles, watching Netflix, doing other things. When National Guard totaled their Enterprise rental truck on the gate at the National Butterfly Center, what we found were Bud Light cans on the ground, which we can only assume bounced out of the truck bed when that truck made impact and was destroyed. The local police will not release any public information related to calls and reports that they have to take of drunken disorderly conduct, noise complaints, property damage, sexual assault, all of these things happening at the hotels where National Guard is staying. But we know from visitors and from property managers and others that this is happening regularly because
they don't have good leadership, and it's frankly it's like really young kids that are down there. And the other thing that we need to say too is that the National Guard that's being posted there, the young National Guard kids are seeing increased rates of suicide, and that's something that's particular to Border Patrol agents, because when you're an oppressor and you do that kind of work, then you're going to end up the suicide rates go through the roof as they are with the Border Patrol, and now you're seeing that with the National Guard. But Mariana's right. There's a lot of stuff that they're suppressing about what these National Guard kids are getting into because they're bored down there. So they're sitting down there in Texas drinking and whooping it up and getting in trouble, but it's all kind of hush hush quiet about that.
Yeah. No.
And not only are they bored, but these are, like you said, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds getting paid $6,000 a month. Like they have never had this kind of cash before. And what are they going to do with it? They're going to go buy guns at our local pawn shop.
They pay the National Guard that well?
That's what they're being paid. And
really?
Initially, their taxes were not being withheld or anything. So
because they're on deployment.
That was a whole nother issue. And then for a while, they were trying to unionize because they were not getting the benefits of a regular deployment. And the ones who were working in law enforcement already as police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and such, they also, while they're on deployment, do not accrue their hours toward their pensions. So they're taking another hit for that. And so these were all things that I guess the state didn't really think through when they called all these people up and forced them to come sit on the border and do mind-numbing work for the most part.
No, it's just it's a terrible idea. Like comprehensive. It's one of those things. If you spent any time studying the surge in Iraq in kind of the later part of the Bush years and some of the shit that happened when they just grabbed a bunch of National Guard guys and threw it's a lot of the same shit. It's people who were like finding ways to get alcohol and drugs, who were crashing cars, who were because you were. It's just this is an inevitable consequence, which is why you shouldn't do something like this unless there's like a dire reason to need to bring the National Guard into a situation like a natural disaster.
Yeah, and I think. Go ahead.
I would say that they all need house mothers. I mean, fraternities have and stuff, because every time I run into one of these young men and they start to like look at me or open their mouth a certain way, I just want to grab them by the ear and be like, Junior, I'm going to spank you, whippersnapper.
Yeah. You are 19. You should not be in this position right now. Go home. Get out of here.
Go back to your mom. Yeah, we spoke
shut
to
up
a few.
Or I'll take your gun from you too.
But we spoke to a few of them, like Robert and I, when we were down there, and like one of them was just saying like he's trying to get some money for college, and I don't think they're accruing those benefits because if they're under state orders, they don't get it. So Greg Abbott's kind of screwing everyone apart from himself and his little friends, I guess. Maybe to finish up, I know that I think the only case like I can come across of this happening, of someone dying or trying to rescue migrants, was a National Guard soldier who tried to rescue some people from the river and drowned, from what I understand. And like, obviously this drowning barrier is going to, if Border Patrol are even investing in getting people from the river, which they might not be if they're from the Mexican side, if they're still on the Mexican side of the border, right? It in theory would put those people, those like National Guard and Border Patrol agents, in danger too. So what have Border Patrol to say about the floating barrier so far?
They haven't said anything about it so far. And there have been a few Border Patrol agents who've lost their lives jumping into the river as well. There have been other migrants who've lost their lives trying to save their children and so forth. Migrants die every day in that river. Yeah. And the Border Patrol is just going to stay quiet about it because they like it. It's their management who's going along with it. And if they didn't like it, and if the Biden administration didn't like it, then they would come out and say so, or they would come out and have Chief Gloria Chavez come out and say, no, we're not going to have this. This is going to kill people. This is not right. Honor first, blah, 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 which we all know it's bullshit. But the truth is they really don't care. They just don't care. And as they say in the Border Patrol, and we learn, and you all learn, I knew it, but you all learn from the 1015 group on Facebook, they call them floaters and take pictures of them and make fun of it. So the Border Patrol could care less. It's just one less migrant they got to process.
Well, and as Jen said, if U.S. Border Patrol was opposed to this new border barrier, they would say something. Well, I think it's even worse than that. In 2018, Trump got border wall funding. And as you mentioned, he had his, commando climb all these border wall prototypes in the desert and all of that. In 2019, he got his second tranche of border wall funding. But 2020 and 2021 were continuing resolutions. So he was getting border wall funding after that, but it was always for existing approved designs. Yeah. And those are the concrete with the steel bollards.
Yeah.
So even though Trump floated the idea of this buoy border barrier, this floating border wall, to get congressional approval or U.S. Army Corps of Engineer approval for such a thing would have been an issue. Also, there's the issue of the International Boundary and Water Commission Treaty, which is a binational treaty with Mexico that governs the Rio Grande River, the water that flows in it, the boundaries, who gets to take how much water from it, things that are built and might affect the flow of the river. As Jen mentioned, the international boundary is the middle of the river, no matter where the river is flowing now, because over millions of years, it has shifted. The channel has shifted many, many times and greatly. So we know the feds, probably Border Patrol with the Trump administration, so DHS, wanted this floating border wall. The easiest way for them to get it is to have Governor Abbott do it. In 2005, the Real ID Act, in that act of legislation, Congress gave the Secretary of Homeland Security the authority to waive every law, local, state, federal, for border barrier. So it doesn't say border wall, it says border barrier. So presumably this buoy border barrier would also be covered. So the feds don't have to worry about something like the National Environmental Policy Act or the Endangered Species Act or the Rivers and Harbors Act in deploying this. But they do not have authority to waive treaties or the Constitution. Yeah. So since at least 2005, the federal government has been trying to devise ways to effectively waive the IBWC treaty. One of the ways in which they have done that is with the We Build the Wall campaign, which built, they built border barrier on the international boundary line in Sunland Park, New Mexico, and in Mission, Texas. And the US government settled with them, allowing this illegal structure to stand in violation of the treaty in spite of Mexico's objections, thereby setting a legal precedent, effectively waiving the treaty. But now Abbott can do this, and who's going to sue him? The IBWC isn't going to do a damn thing because they have no authority to sue on their own. They have to go to the federal government and ask the Department of Justice to sue on their behalf. And it's the Department of Justice that has already settled with Fisher Industries for the We Build the Wall fraud fence in violation of the treaty. The other issue is Texas doesn't have to abide by NEPA or any equivalent law. And we know that the feds have in the past devised really nasty reach arounds for the law, where if they get busted doing something illegal, like having Customs and Border Protection spray imazapyr, a broad spectrum herbicide that is a known carcinogen, all over people, animals, and plants on the border, they get sued and made to stop that. They'll simply pass the money through to the state of Texas and ask them to continue it. And I think this floating buoy border barrier is exactly that kind of thing. The Biden administration can say, we're not doing it, and they don't have to get approval for this design. And they'll just find a way to either pass the money through to Texas or allow Texas to continue to basically fundraise for it by prosecuting immigrants for criminal trespass and fining them to get out of county jail.
Yeah, well, that is dark. That is. But yeah,
I think it's interesting to point out, though, that when Governor Ducey of Arizona put up his train car thing,
yeah,
the Biden administration did get involved with that, and they were upset about that. But so far, we haven't seen anything about this, and so we'll see if they deploy it, and the Biden administration stays quiet about it.
Yeah, I mean, we're closing in on like November 2024, and I think Biden really is very sensitive about being seen as quote unquote weak on the border, and like given the absolute disaster that was the end of Title 42 and the way they handled that, and they didn't really say anything when Border Patrol was clearly holding people in conditions that are in violation of their own detention standards. Like I don't have high hopes for the Biden administration doing it.
Yeah, it's interesting because you would think like the whole thing from the union and everybody that is pro Border Patrol and anti-immigrant was like, if you end Title 42, then it's just going to overwhelm the Border Patrol and more people will come. And we kept saying for a year, like, no, that's not going to happen. It's going to be drastically cut. And so it's drastically cut. And you would think the Biden administration would be like, look what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they're not. I mean, like they have no clue how to talk about the border and what to do on the border. It's sad.
Well, and it's this double-edged sword of get in line, do it the legal way. So the people who say we're not anti-immigrant, we just want them to do it the legal way and get in line. So Title 42 ends. We've got the CBP One app, which gives them an appointment so they can stand in line to cross at a legal port of entry and do it legally. And now they've got to find a way to thwart that and to mess it up. And Biden, as you said, is not saying, look at what we did. We've got everybody standing in line, doing it the legal way.
Yeah, I think they don't want to look at CBP One too hard, given what a disaster it's been and how biased it's been and how bad it continues to be. But
for sure.
They've failed to offer any other options. And I don't really have any hope that things will not just get worse. There seems to be a bipartisan consensus that it's okay to kill lots of people trying to come to our country for help because it's it's bad
Well,
if Fox News is mean to you.
Jen has been very vocal and produced lots and lots of research and documentation on how our deterrence policies are designed to kill. And there are not a whole lot of people using the G word, but Jen has been courageous enough to do it. I was recently told by my employer that I could not use it. And I think it's a horror, but Jen can speak to it.
We have to do a whole nother episode on that.
Yeah, I think we should do. Well, yeah, we're definitely going to keep covering this because it's one of the things that just disappears from a lot of national media in between election cycles or in between.
Well, and unfortunately, it's one of the things where kind of the numbers are heading in the wrong direction nationwide, because like the border, like the right is winning on border stuff right now. The right is winning on immigration. Like there's some pretty dark polling. Like as much as, you know, some of the last couple of elections have been positive in terms of the pitiful performance of like kind of MAGA Republicans. Like if you look at kind of how Americans are polling on border issues and immigration issues, it's pretty bleak at the moment. And I don't think anyone has a great clear clue as to like how to reverse that at the moment, which isn't to say that it can't be reversed. It's just it's difficult.
Well, it's difficult, especially when the Democrats are always ceding the argument to the Republicans.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
They're afraid to make the argument that a robust and humane asylum system that can inspect the people requesting asylum is a national security issue, and you need one. You can't just not have you can't have an asylum, not have an asylum system. You have to have, it's an essential part to the national security infrastructure. So people that argue that we shouldn't have an asylum system because it's a threat to national security are completely ignorant about what they're talking about. And so they have to start framing it as a national security issue, you know, one where we can have people come and be inspected and so forth. And then the people who are the nefarious people, yeah, they're going to go in between the ports of entry. Fine, arrest those people, but let's have a humane system otherwise. So
it's also fundamental to the success of our economy. And with, you know, the US birth rate is declining, and without a robust, safe, timely immigration system, ideally one that allows people to go back and forth, because what I hear from people here is, I miss my country. I want to return to my country. I want to come here to see my family, to work for a season or for a spell, to send money home. But then I want to be able to return. And our current system is too deadly to allow them to make it through and then go back and attempt to do that a second time. Another issue related to the narrative and red winning on immigration is we found at the Butterfly Center that when Biden continued building border wall, and we said, oh my gosh, you know, this is what's happening, and we posted photos and video and everything of it, people who had supported us, Democrats, liberals with a capital L, who had supported us, said, you're lying, or that's just they're continuing Trump's, they had to. And then when we contradicted every one of those arguments with facts, then they said, oh, well, if Biden's doing it, then there must be a good reason. And, you know, the US can't accept everybody. And, you know, you get this walking back of all of the things that they were saying when Trump was president about being humane, about needing an effective system, about creative solutions and all of this. And now it's suddenly, well, you know, we can't let everybody in. And so I have honestly found, and I'm going to take a lot of flack for this, but there's basically no difference between a moderate Republican and a liberal, capital L.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. Certainly, Trump had months of Title 42. Biden had years of it. Like it's
certainly. Clear. I mean, it's I think pretty much impossible to argue with that, at least on the on a broad scale. Like if you're just kind of like looking at national trends, there's ample support for that argument.
Yeah, Obama deported more people than anyone had
Absolutely.
previously.
Yeah, massive number.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
Yeah.
On that happy note.
Yeah.
Cool.
Where can people find out more terrible stuff about the border? Is there a podcast they can listen to?
We do have a podcast, Border Patrol Watch. Mariana and I have kind of started it just to talk about a lot of these issues that we feel are being left out. And it's on YouTube. We also have a TikTok account and Twitter for the moment. We'll see how that goes. And Facebook and Instagram, and there is borderpatrolwatch.com. Yeah. And that list, there's a page on there for all the agents arrested for rape and pedophilia. There's a corruption page. There's a page on how they try and indoctrinate the youth down here on the borderlands and so forth. So yeah, I'm all about that jazz.
Yeah, that's hashtag on it first. And so where can people, it's all Border Patrol Watch. How about you two? Do you guys have individual accounts? Where can they find you?
Jen is doing most of this, and I believe it's under the Border Patrol Watch banner.
Okay. Yeah, it is.
Because, both of us found ourselves targeted or throttled or being, really suppressed by Twitter and Facebook and
lost my 40,000 followers. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, but Border Patrol Watch is great. You had a great thread on agents who are facing charges for sexual assault, and that's a very small minority of agents who have done sexual assaults, sadly. But yeah, there's some really good information for people on there.
Yeah, those are just the ones who are being prosecuted or have been convicted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, most of them sadly have not. And even the ones who have, it took too long and was far too convoluted. We can talk again on that happy topic another day, but thank you so much for giving us some of your afternoon, guys. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for all you do and for getting the word out.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Let's talk about modern home shopping. It's sort of become a fun side hobby, right? Scrolling listings at night, dreaming about kitchens you've never seen, or backyards you haven't even stepped foot in, all from the comfort of pretty much anywhere. Redfin knows a lot of people like you want to own, but are stuck in this browsing mode loop. That's where Redfin flips the script. With listings that update within minutes and tours you can book right from the Redfin app, you can see your dream home the moment it appears. Now, liking a listing is easy, but actually landing it, that's where Redfin comes in. Redfin has over 2,200 agents with local expertise. And Redfin agents close twice as many deals as other agents. That means they want to help you win, not just window shop. Redfin is built to help you go from just looking to wait, this could actually be home. So become the newest neighbor on the block. Visit redfin.com to start finding and start owning. That's redfin.com.
Tired of spills and stains on your sofa? Wash away your worries with Anabay. Anabay is the only machine washable sofa inside and out, where designer quality meets budget-friendly prices. That's right, sofas start at just $699. Enjoy a no-risk experience with pet-friendly, stain-resistant, and changeable slip covers made with performance fabric. Experience cloud-like comfort with high-resilience foam that's hypoallergenic and never needs fluffing. The sturdy steel frame ensures longevity, and the modular pieces can be rearranged anytime. Shop WashableSofas.com for up to 60% off site-wide, backed by a 30-day satisfaction guarantee. If you're not absolutely in love, send it back for a full refund. No return shipping or restocking fees. Every penny back. Upgrade now at WashableSofas.com. Offers are subject to change, and certain restrictions may apply.
It could happen here. It's the podcast that's happening here. That's not why we called it that, but you know, such is the world. And today I'm going to be talking about one of our, I don't want to say rare, but we're doing one of our How Do We Put the World Back Together episodes. And in order to do that, I'm going to be talking with Mira and Corin, who are two organizers for the Dual Power Gathering Midwest. That's happening in, 2 months-ish? Yeah. Corin, Mira, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks.
It's great to be on.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have you two. Okay, so I guess we should start with, so this is, well, I don't know if second's the right term. The first of these happens last year in Indiana. Is it last year? Yeah, it was last year. I had to do a quick checking my memory to make sure that 2022 was in fact last year, and we haven't somehow skipped into 2024 already. Oh boy, things are going great here. But yeah, I wanted to, I guess, start with talking about what the Dual Power Gathering is, and yeah, like what happened at the first one and how did it go?
Yeah, so Dual Power Gathering, I guess maybe a thing to start with is what is dual power.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that in a bit. Probably I can explain it for new people.
Maybe the best way to put it is something that maybe a lot of people have heard before, which is building a new world in the shell of the old. So we live in a society, right?
Unfortunately.
So there's a lot of institutions that we have to deal with. And for a lot of people, it's essential to rely on these institutions because there's not other options. And as anarchists, it's kind of our goal to build those other options. And dual power is that building a second power in opposition to the state powers. So, like tech stuff, internet mesh networks, just alternative infrastructures, alternative medical care, though I'm sure that specific phrasing can imply something else, which I did not mean, but just working with communities to try to not rely on the state. And so Dual Power Gathering is bringing together a bunch of people from orgs and independent activists, and honestly, people who just want to get involved and don't know a lot, to help build those counterstructures. And honestly, this Cool Zone Media brought a lot of people when we did the podcast from last year. So it seems like your audience really likes this stuff.
Yeah. I'm sad I wasn't able to go to last year's. I was in the process of setting up for it, and then I had a COVID scare and had to lock down for an entire week, and it turned out that I didn't have it, but yeah, I'm very sad.
I preferred that you didn't spread COVID.
Yeah, I was okay, let's not endanger people's lives. That seems better than in fact doing that.
And on that note, since there's been questions about other events, we will be having mask requirements and at the event to make sure that immunocompromised people are not being excluded. I want to make that clear.
Yeah, and this is so I the last one, from my understanding, it was a bunch of people camping in the dunes basically. And is this one also going to be sort of like mostly an outdoor thing?
Yeah, so it's going to be, we're not just going to say the location here. You can find that out through registering, but the location is just near Chicago, and it's similarly outside. It's a big open space, not a lot of trees, which is sad this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be mostly camping, but there's cabins and people can stay in hotels nearby also.
Yeah, so I guess, okay, we've talked a bit about what dual power is and sort of building this kind of counterpower and building, I mean, I guess I would just want to say a little bit, like, these are, like, dual power institutions are just a lot of the things that, just we talk about building, or like people, or we've been involved in building. These can be things like tenants unions, like different like regular unions, like caucuses and unions, like mutual aid networks, like worker centers. So there's there's all sorts of things that can be involved in this. But so now we've gotten through dual power, we've sort of gotten through gathering, but I want to ask a bit more about like what happens at the thing when you go to it.
Yeah. So it's built on the unconference model of doing things, which in essence is aiming to kind of counteract the idea that we need to have a sort of structured event that's, you do this at this point, you do this at this point, you do this at this point. It instead is meant to be built more towards libertarian socialist principles, and it is where people are able to kind of build their own agenda from the start of the event and kind of structure their day how they want to. So you can talk to these people to go to a skill sharing event on a Stop the Bleed training. You can talk to these people to go to a skill share event on how to facilitate meetings. You can talk to these folk to learn a bit about anarchist history, just all these different things that can be formatted however you may so choose, and that are all kind of happening at the discretion of people who are involved. So it's very much so just up to you to build your own day. And of course, you can also talk to other people there if you need some help. Plenty of the organizers involved are more than willing to help out and, lend people a hand in figuring out where everything is and what they might want to do and what other people are doing to structure their day around. But at the core, it's built around individual choice, autonomy, and just a non-hierarchical method of going about it.
So I can talk a little bit more about how that looked practically from last year. So the first night I wasn't there, so I can't talk much about that, but it was just mostly getting to know everybody. People were coming in throughout the night because work and all that on a Friday. But then that Saturday, after breakfast, which I don't even remember, it was like oatmeal or something, we got together in this assembly area and brought out whiteboards and marked out days, and people like just stuck up what they wanted to talk about in a session on the board in a time slot. And then we got everyone to figure out, which ones of these can be condensed. Do two people have similar ideas? Can they talk about how they might want to have a session together? And then people just chose which sessions to go to. We kept the whiteboards up so people could see what was going on and where. And that worked out pretty well. I think the biggest concern from that was people wanted to go to everything. We simply did not have time. They were like, can we make this a week? And I think that's pushing it money-wise. Yeah. It's expensive enough to rent a campsite for a weekend.
Hey, if anyone has like just a bunch of land they have sitting around they want to give to us for this,
yeah. If you can make whatever ranch or farm you have like accessible for people, then yes, please reach out for future gatherings. But the most important part, I think, was that the gathering model allowed all different groups there who had similar interests. For example, there was a POC caucus to self-organize. There's also like a sex workers group. they were able to come together on their own, figure out what's going on, and it wasn't based on what organizers thought was important. It was based on what participants thought was important. And I think that also facilitated a lot of networking. You were able to see, hey, there's a DIY medicine circle going on in this campsite. Well, I'm going to go maybe stop by. I might not stay the whole time, but I'm going to check it out, see if I'm interested, see if I like the people there. And it allowed for especially newer folks to interact with veteran activists, and just engage with stuff they might have only felt interested in slightly, and actually get involved and contribute. So yeah, that's how it practically went for the unconference. And we didn't hear that many complaints about it, except that it maybe sometimes sessions were not timed, like the time was too short or too long, or that it wasn't like a week or two.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and then that's stuff that, like, it's especially the first time you're running an event, like stuff like that happens, and you know, we can. Okay, this is I have not an enormous amount of experience running like panels and stuff, but like I've done it, and it like, God, getting the timing right is really hard and very annoying. But it's, you know, this is a thing that subsequent events can and will sort of iterate on and get better at, because, you know, I guess one of the things that we are in fact learning at these is how to do these things that, you know, I guess in this way hasn't been done before.
Yeah, and it's not, I mean, not technically not been done before, but not done in this way.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Like there's crime think convergences or like the bashback, but
yeah. Well, I think it's an interesting thing too, on a sort of like, I don't know. I think there's a way in which this is in some sense kind of getting back to like older like models of anarchist organizing that kind of like, I'm not gonna say they disappeared, but there'd been sort of less of them due to, like, you know, just sort of like political shifts and just like shifts in the way people organized and like just what kinds of stuff were happening at any given time. And so, you know, and I think like the consequence of this is a lot of people sort of relearning and inventing things that like had been known, but, you know, everyone's working through it together, and, you know, it turns out we're like we're pretty good at building things.
Yeah.
Yeah, like one thing that I think is really cool about DPG that kind of shines through is seeing how something like building an event like this, like when I first got involved, you know, I pictured building an event like this as a huge ordeal. You know, it was, you needed all these big connections. You needed to know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. You needed so many different resources at your disposal. It never really hit me that this could be something that just regular people could just up and decide to do. It's not to say it doesn't take a lot of effort and work. It does. But it's still ultimately something that is in the power of people to do if they really set themselves onto it and are able to find enough helping hands, both fiscally and in terms of the actual event. So it's like, it's really cool to see just everyone coming together in the organizing process, and it just being a very organic, natural thing. It's like, I don't know, you see it a lot with like other specific events. I've done Food Not Bomb stuff, and I've seen it there too. But like, it's different when it's something that you typically foresee, at least I did, foresee as like, oh, you know, building a whole weekend-long event, you know, you got to have corporate big shots doing that. You know, how can you expect the little guys to do that?
And yeah, it's also cool to see people just jump in and help who might not even have other organizing experience. We saw this last year too, near the end of the planning for the gathering. There were so many people joining little circles on planning food and transportation logistics and how can I contribute. And I think the resounding result was people finding political hope. That was a term I heard a lot from individuals who both went and helped organize the last one, and we're hoping to create a similar thing this time.
Yeah, and that's something that, like, I don't know. I think everyone can use a bit more of right now, in a very sort of depressing and bleak, like, there's a lot of bad stuff happening, and the ability to generate hope, and you could even think of it in just terms of like morale, right? Like, it's really, really, really hard to actually achieve or change anything if everyone has just sort of given up already. And, like, being around other people and being in, like, planning events with people and doing stuff with people, like, is a very, very good way to, just sort of break the kind of, like, existential dread and, like, depression of like living in, and sort of hopelessness of like living in this like disaster that we've all been thrown into.
Yeah, something that somebody had mentioned at the last gathering that really stuck with me was that because of the uprising and COVID, most leftist organizing was formed through trauma bonding.
Yeah.
And it was really nice to form relationships outside of traumatic incidents. And they felt longer lasting and much safer than relationships built during crisis.
Yeah, and I think, I think like a thing that's just sort of important along those lines to remember is that like building relationships, there's a decent extent to which that's just all organizing is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not all organizing is, but it's a really important part of it. And the way that people are able to do this, especially in the wake of a bunch of like, really sort of traumatic and horrible experiences people went through. Like, yeah, glad we have a better way to do this.
Yeah, like stuff like this is essentially some of the only things that give me a sense of optimism for the future, because those who know me know I tend to be a very pessimistic person. I don't look at current events, to put it concisely, and say, "Oh wow, things are going pretty topsy-turvy out there." But when we have stuff like this going on, that's just built at the level of, hey, we're people trying to make things better and prevent the chaos from the outside world and the world around us from just consuming everything. It's like, it gives a nice sense of community and a nice sense of, hey, we're not alone in this, and that maybe tomorrow things will be a little bit better than they were today.
Yeah.
It's especially important, in my opinion. The first gathering, I was not living in a city as I do now. I was living in not a city that just people in big cities would call a city. I was in Nebraska, and
I was going to make a joke about Davenport or something.
And
that's kind of unfair to Davenport.
Yeah, so being able to meet other rural organizers in various places, especially, honestly, the Appalachia region, which I did not realize was so related in their struggles, was important because no matter how much I wanted to network, there wasn't really that opportunity as much as there is in cities. And in cities, doesn't mean you're necessarily meeting more people or people that you necessarily would like to organize with. There's often more need and not necessarily more anarchists.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this is something we've talked about before, but we've basically built it. Well, okay, I say we didn't really build this, but the social system we lived in, the social system that we live in has been built sort of very specifically and very deliberately to isolate people. And yeah, and this sort of functions in different ways depending on sort of geography and like regional stuff. But yeah, like I think this is, an important tool to sort of break that and to bring people together and to bring like, I don't know, like I think like another part of this we haven't talked about as much is like just like really incredible things happen when you bring people together from struggles that like turn out to be very similar, but like aren't usually involved with each other, or like aren't sort of like not like haven't been able to sort of like link up before. You get very sort of like, I don't know, you get a lot of really interesting sort of like ideas and strategic stuff from it.
Yeah, like one thing that I've noticed, especially because I've done a lot of small town rural organizing, is that you can kind of easily develop like very isolated communities and isolated radical cultures in like specific regions. And it's not a great pitfall to fall into because you miss out on a lot of developments that might happen elsewhere. You miss out on a lot of other things that might be happening in other regions. And even beyond just regions, going into specific intersectional issues like different organizers who might focus specifically on racism versus queerphobia versus ableism. There's all things to learn from each other.
Yeah.
There's all interconnectedness, and when you tie that into interconnectedness of different regions, there's just a big need for things to be kind of like a large web of connectivity instead of just, things are kept separate and now we're stuck developing on our own. And that's never fun.
Yeah. And, and I guess circling this sort of back around to the specific event, the thing that y'all are doing to combat this is the Dual Power Gathering Midwest. So I wanted to talk a little bit about when is this happening? And also, what are the plans so far for what it's going to look like and what people are going to be doing?
So it's August 17th through 20th. And this year's going to be pretty similar to last year. And you can also look at Dual Power West, which had their gathering earlier this summer. There's if you go to Sabo Media, I think it's sabommedia.noblogs.org or whatever the NoBlogs address is. You can look it up. They did a good report back on how that went. And we'll also have a documentary up if people want to learn more. Sorry, that's sidetrack.
We'll
put
links to that in the description.
So right now we're soliciting a lot of people to come and bring what they have to offer to the table. We are in the end stages of setting everything up and getting everything connected. And part of that is we want people to bring over what they want to share, skills they want to share, cool things they've learned about leftist history, things that are important to know for modern day society, intersectional issues, discussions, basically anything that people could think of that might be worthwhile. Come on over, bring it in. We'd love to talk to people and hear more about it. So in terms of specifics that we might have planned, that is where we're currently at. We're aiming for it to be like last year, in that it's a Skillshare event and a discussion, like I said, a discussions and just a way for people to share what they know with each other. And a few of us currently involved, we all have our own ideas. I personally want to talk about unions and kind of be like, hey, unionize your workplace. But that's more so just me, and that it could be up to anyone what they want to do, kind of building off the unconference model of it. It's if people want it, and it's not like how to be a fascist 101, then it's welcome.
Some things we predict that will happen at the gathering will probably be circles on trans healthcare and abortion care, given recent events. Yeah. Well, it's not really recent feeling anymore, but that plus I think much more community defense is coming up because of those. And I think, as always, there's all the DIY folks who come in last year. Pretty cool. And I might overemphasize how much that's a part because I'm also one of those DIY people. It's a problem and an addiction at this point. But like, you know, people who wanted to just build their own car. It's cool stuff. Yeah. The random expertise of people coming was wonderful. And that all came together in ways I don't think anyone could have predicted.
That's so cool.
Like literally showing how to use batteries and how to, like, in a correct way, chaining them. Education, I have an engineering degree. A lot of this stuff was so new to me in a very good way. And I hope that similar people come back. We can never predict. I don't know. Leftists are wild. You never know.
Yeah.
If they're going to take to something. If we don't even know if certain people liked it because they just dropped off the map because they were, you know, just walking to Denver or something after the gathering. And but I think the gathering is, our focus has been on getting people to network. And so I think what we've planned besides food, which I think we can talk about in a second, is just making sure people come away with, like, the relationships we've talked so much about already, and trying to give people the opportunities explicitly to socialize, because we also know that people tend to be not very friendly when approached in maybe everyday organizing, even though you say they should be, maybe, but life's stressful and I don't blame people. So we're trying to make it a very friendly environment for talking to other people, and trying to maybe make that the only other structured thing in the day besides meals.
Yeah, well, and I guess I should also say that, like, if you can do something cool and you want to go show people how to do something cool, you should in fact do this because it rips.
Please.
Yes,
just for me.
Like, please come and show us some cool stuff. Like, there is so much opportunity for amazing things.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, speaking of amazing things, yeah, we should talk about food a little bit because, you know, food, important part of all human societies.
So for food, we're aiming for it to be catered vegan food from local restaurants, along with various cooked meals as well, is what we're kind of shooting for. So we're going to be covering 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and aiming to have enough to cover everyone for the 3 days of the gathering.
Yeah, and if food we have doesn't work, we also have plans to make sure that we can accommodate people. This is not far from other, like, it's not like out in the middle of nowhere. We'll be able to access various, like, stores and stuff. A lot of the gatherings would rely on the typical way of just having, I don't know, some gatherings just have the food happen. They just say, well, food's on the group, and that's fun and all, but we also want to ensure that there is food.
Yeah, and that there's, like, vegan options for people, which is
absolutely
yeah, and stuff like that. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about the event before we close out?
Yeah, I'll just say too that we are aiming for this event to be accessible to folk with disabilities, folk with children, essentially to anyone and everyone who would be interested. We want this to be accessible. On our website, we talk a bit more in detail about the specific ways in which the site itself is disability accessible. And we also invite folk to, if there's any suggestions, concerns, anything of the sort, for how we can make this more accessible for people, more welcoming, more open. We invite people to come and let us know. We're still learning and still trying to do this better. So anything we can improve upon, please let us know, because we want to do right by folk.
And on the note of families and kids, youth are absolutely welcome. We have some families in, some parents specifically in the organizing right now. We want kids to be able to be as involved as they want to be. Last year, I think that it ended up working out with the kids that were there, and they're amazing. And you can see that in the documentary too. But we want to make sure that's something we actually plan for this time, to make sure that they don't feel excluded, and also that parents are able to fully participate. And yeah, you can see more on our website, which is dpgmidwest.org.
Yeah, we'll have links to that in the description too.
Yeah, and on there you'll see linked is our open collective, where if you go there, there's a variety of options on there, which might be overwhelming. There's a donation option if you can't come but would like to donate. And then there's tickets. You can use pseudonyms. It's pretty anonymous. It's fine. And you don't have to pay necessarily. But there's a suggested donation listed on there so that we are able to afford the campsite and people don't have to pay too much upfront to buy the campsite. I guess rent the campsite for the days and get food and stuff. And then there's options to reserve a spot in a cabin. If there's still spots left, we don't need to have a reservation, but we're trying to make sure that it's that we're prioritizing people with those access needs. And of course, our email's also listed on both the Open Collective and the website, so that'll probably be the main source for info. We also have a Collectiva account, despite the problems happening right now.
Learn OPSEC. Do that, people. It's good. You will go far.
Come learn OPSEC at the DPG.
Yeah.
God, I'm thinking about making a Tumblr because what's happening. But it's also at DPG Midwest at collectiva.social.
Yeah, and once again, this is running from August 17th to the 20th, and yeah, if it sounds interesting, go sign up, and yeah, thank you two so much for joining us. I say us. Why am I saying us? Sorry, I just reflexively do the us, and then I'm like, wait, hold on.
There's the royal we and the anarchist us.
Yeah, and I'm excited. I don't know. I may be there, I may not be. It depends on a bunch of scheduling stuff that I have very little control over. But yeah, other people should go. It's going to be a good event. And yeah, thank you two again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and this has been It Could Happen Here. You can find us in the usual places if they still exist by the time this episode comes out. Oh yeah, we now have the Cooler Zone Media thing. If you don't want to listen to the Reagan ads or like I don't know, a bunch of other ads for podcasts or whatever weird things playing right now. I think I've been getting casino ads lately, which is kind of interesting. But if you don't want to listen to that, we have a subscription service from Apple that you can buy, and then you don't want to have ads for all of our shows. We're still working on the Android one. That hopefully will be happening soon, but that's another thing. That's we're doing our best. We unfortunately are not Apple. Like, we don't own all of the stuff, so we have to do a bunch of stuff to work through it. But yeah, go out into the world, build dual power, and have a good time while you do it.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Let's talk about modern home shopping. It's sort of become a fun side hobby, right? Scrolling listings at night, dreaming about kitchens you've never seen, or backyards you haven't even stepped foot in, all from the comfort of pretty much anywhere. Redfin knows a lot of people like you want to own, but are stuck in this browsing mode loop. That's where Redfin flips the script. With listings that update within minutes and tours you can book right from the Redfin app, you can see your dream home the moment it appears. Now, liking a listing is easy, but actually landing it, that's where Redfin comes in. Redfin has over 2,200 agents with local expertise. And Redfin agents close twice as many deals as other agents. That means they want to help you win, not just window shop. Redfin is built to help you go from just looking to wait, this could actually be home. So become the newest neighbor on the block. Visit redfin.com to start finding and start owning. That's redfin.com.
Sink into affordable luxury. Anabe is the only machine washable sofa, inside and out. With stain-resistant slip covers and a cloud-like frame duvet, everything goes right in the wash. Plus, the modular design lets you change the look of your space anytime. Visit washablesofas.com to upgrade your home. Shop up to 60% off site-wide, with sofas starting at just $699 and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Shop now at washablesofas.com. Offers are subject to change, and certain restrictions may apply.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It Could Happen Here with your guest host, Andrew of the YouTube channel Andrewism. Today I'm joined by Mia, and I'm looking to discuss a topic that I brought up in passing in a previous episode, that being the idea of conviviality, and the episode in question being in my podcast on degrowth. So when I first stumbled upon this concept of conviviality, I thought it was just, one of those exciting, fluffy, agitprop buzzwords, right? Something you you throw into your propaganda, your conversations, your descriptions of a better world. You're like, oh, I would love to live in a world that's more convivial, all these different things. Convivial being defined in the dictionary as the quality of being friendly and lively, right? Synonyms include amiability, affability, congeniality, etc., etc. I didn't come here to be a thesaurus. I came here to talk about the deeper meanings behind these things, right? So in searching this word and this term up in more depth, I ended up going down this rabbit hole, and I discovered there's a whole history to the term that spans, I'm not going as far back as its Latin origins, right? I mean, we could talk about the French and their loan words making their way into the English language. We could talk about the Spanish concept of convivencia being interpreted literally as living in the company of others, or in one particular context, such as in Spain between the 18th and 15th centuries, describing the peaceful coexistence between different religious groups. But I'm not going that far back. I'm sticking to the history of the term from Ivan Illich to the degrowth movement to the conviviality manifestos that have come out of online and offline discussions, academic and non-academic discussions of this idea of conviviality. Now, I gave a sort of a basic dictionary definition before, but I want to go a bit deeper, right? So what is conviviality exactly? Conviviality is about creating a fun and friendly atmosphere where people can come together and have a great time. That's it in its essence, right? It's that feeling you get when you're surrounded by lively conversations and laughter and a sense of celebration. You know, those moments where everyone's enjoying each other's company and there's a real sense of camaraderie. I think using conviviality as a barometer is really helpful in organizing situations, right? If you're in an environment where you are organizing, where you're doing praxis, and you're not picking up those convivial vibes, it may be a sign that there's some toxicity in the mix there. I'm not saying that the work of activism has to be a trip to an amusement park, right? It doesn't have to be a carnival. But I think there does need to be, for solidarity to exist, I think there should have some level of camaraderie and conviviality in the atmosphere. So you can think of conviviality as the spirit of hospitality and warmth, right? It's like when you gather with your friends or when you have those family occasions and you bring everyone together, even in the workplace, you know, when you and your workers are getting along really well and you're organizing to create this union and you're going to take down your boss. It's a fun time, right? And so how do we get from this, you know, sort of seemingly simple, sociable idea of living and enjoying life in the company of others, making people feel welcomed and included? How do we move from that idea? This conviviality is a vital part of human interaction to conviviality in a more political context. How do we go from just talking about social connections and adding meaning to our lives and enjoying festivities and shift to conversations about the social and political state of the world right now? Right? There's this one particular guy who's kind of responsible for this. A guy I personally like to call the illest, that being the one and only Australian philosopher, social critic, and Catholic priest, Ivan Illich. Over the course of his nearly 80 years of life since 1926, this multi-hyphenate, I think that's the term we use for people who have a lot of different titles, right? This multi-hyphenate from Vienna, Italy, had a significant impact on a bunch of fields, you know, from education to medicine to technology to social justice. I know his name because he came up a lot when I was doing research on unschooling, deschooling, and just the education system as a whole. But apparently he's done a lot more than just that. He's challenged conventional thinking in all sorts of fields, and he's questioned the inherent assumptions and structures of modern society. Ivan's, and I hope he doesn't mind that I call him Ivan, because I don't know if I'm pronouncing his German name correctly, right? His German last name correctly. So I just call him Ivan. He probably wouldn't mind because he's dead, but Ivan's intellectual journey took him through a bunch of different paths, right? He studied theology and philosophy and eventually became a priest. And he lived and worked in different parts of the world, including Latin America, where he witnessed firsthand the effects of development projects and the power dynamics between developed and developing nations. And those experiences deeply influenced his critical perspective on the modern industrialized world. He also became a very prolific author, known for his thought-provoking and often controversial writings, such as Deschooling Society, which he published in 1971, Tools for Conviviality, published in 1973, and Medical Nemesis, published in 1976. And in these books, he challenged established institutions and systems, offered alternative visions that emphasized individual autonomy, community engagement, and, wait for it, convivial relationships. Ivan's critique of education systems contributed to the development of alternative educational approaches, such as homeschooling, unschooling, and learner-centered education. His examination of the medical establishment sparked discussions on patient empowerment and the need for a more participatory model of healthcare, something I would like to discuss in a future episode, though I would like to find someone in the disability justice space to have that discussion with, because that is an area of experiential ignorance for me. Yeah, so if anybody has any suggestions, I'd appreciate it. But Ivan's legacy, right, it extends far beyond his lifetime. As it's clear, he has a lasting impact on critical theory, on social philosophy, and the quest for a more just and humane world. I know I'm gassing up the guy a lot, and I'm sure he has some flaws that someone will no doubt inform me about. And I have not read all of it.
So,
yeah.
He
did co-sign the Catholic Church by being a priest, I assume, right? So I'm sure he has his flaws. And I have not read all of his literature. I haven't even read Medical Nemesis yet. But in Tools of Conviviality in particular, I want to discuss his perspective on conviviality and its role in society. Right? In the book, he expresses these deep concerns about the negative effects of modern institutions and systems, and he argued that they often hindered personal freedom, autonomy, and human flourishing. He believed that many of our social structures had become oppressive, as they dictated not only how we should live, learn, and interact, but also how we saw ourselves as people. He argued that our systems had become highly centralized, relying on professional expertise and complex technologies that limited individual agency and self-determination. Now, one could be bad faith, I suppose, and say that, is he saying that, Ivan was anti-complex technology? Is he some sort of popular culture bastardization of Luddites or something? But his concern was not necessarily on the technology itself and the complexity of the technology, but more so how that technology slotted into the structure of society as a whole, right? His concern was about how these elite professional groups had established what he called a radical monopoly over fundamental human activities, including health, agriculture, home building, and learning. And this monopoly is criticized, and not the technology. But the monopoly, according to Ivan, had led to a detrimental war on subsistence that deprived formerly peasant societies of their essential skills and know-how.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like that's a pretty. I think it's pretty hard to
toe that line.
Well, I don't know if it's. I think specifically the line in agriculture is pretty hard to not agree with. If you look at the effects that the Green Revolution had on the people who do agriculture.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this goes to it. This falls in with the sort of the sort of social technological aspect of it, of the fact that this was combined with this massive sort of social technological push to drive farmers into debt, so they could afford the inputs for this stuff, and what it did to sort of what it did to the actual farming communities and what it did to people's livelihoods, and the way that a lot of this was just a sort of smokescreen for consolidation of major landowners, et cetera, et cetera. I think he's pretty
on
right
point there. Yeah. Yeah. For those who don't know, by the way, the Green Revolution refers to a period of technological advancements in agricultural strategies that took place during the mid-20th century, primarily in developing countries. It aimed to increase agricultural productivity and food production through the adoption of high-yielding crop varieties, increased use of fertilizers, pesticides, and modern farming techniques. And the Green Revolution is basically responsible for a lot of the most damaging practices that we see in agriculture today, right? From the heavy reliance on chemical inputs like fertilizers and pesticides, which leads to, soil degradation, water pollution, lost biodiversity, the emphasis on monocultures and replacement of traditional crop varieties with high-yielding ones that reduced agrobiodiversity and led to diseases proliferating between certain species, intensive farming practices that could not be kept up with by small-scale farmers, Like Mia was saying, the consolidation of land and the ability to manage that land into these agribusiness corporations and major landowners.
Yeah, and I think it's worth emphasizing that this was very explicitly seen as an anti-communist thing. I mean, the State Department's like actual explicit line was a green revolution to stop a red revolution. So like a big part of what this was about was like stopping land reform from happening, which is incredibly bleak.
Yeah, and now it's the dominant practice globally, and it's having detrimental impacts globally. And
and I mean,
some of those people are dead. Some of them are going to be dead very soon, and the rest of us have to suffer the consequences. Story of my life.
Yep. Which
story of my existence on this earth, right?
Yeah. The other thing that's sort of wild about it too is that like the countries that did land reform, like, developed better capitalist economies than the ones who didn't. But you know, like
yay, they're better doing capitalism.
Yeah, well, I mean, and like it's like they're better. It turns out doing land reform actually does help both like non-capitalist and capitalist economies, but unfortunately, the Green Revolution people like aren't even like people who care about the efficiency of capitalism. They care about like the power of the landowning class.
Well, yeah, and I mean that. I don't know if this is a saying, but I might make it a saying. I think socialists are better doing capitalism than capitalists are.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is the entire. This is the entire story of China, right? Is like, is Marxist-Leninism is a really, really efficient way to like turn a feudal economy into a capitalist economy.
Yeah, like if I was in charge of capitalism, I was gonna make sure that the people at the bottom class bought into the system wholesale. And propaganda and education is a part of it, but also you want to make sure they're not vulnerable to being radicalized. And the best way to do that is to ensure that their basic needs are met.
Yeah.
But, you know, even arguing that will have some people misinformed, I would say, but well-intentioned, labeling you a socialist. Like, I think people should have good things. Oh, you dirty red commie, you. But, you know, it's just literally welfare capitalism. But apparently that's too much for a lot of capitalists. Not apparently. I mean, literally the reason we have welfare capitalism is because socialists fought for it in the early 20th century and early to mid 20th century. So, you know, we have socialists to thank for everything, basically. But I'm getting off track, right? So like I was saying, this radical monopoly over fundamental human activities led to a detrimental war on subsistence that had deprived peasant societies of the essential skills and know-how. Instead of promoting human flourishing, all this economic development ended up feeding into what Ivan has termed modernized poverty. And it's something that I think about often, right? This idea of the poor back then versus the poor now, right? And of course, it depends on which society you're talking about, which time period you're talking about. But let's just pick some random, historic poor person, right? Let's just say, I don't know, generic civilization A. This person is poor, right? They have to work the land, backbreaking toil. Sometimes raiders would roll in and be like, oh, we're going to take your stuff now. And then they would like ride their horses away and probably, I don't know, dab on you or whatever. Or the raiders will roll in, they'll take your stuff, and then they'll be like, oh, I want to stay. And then now you have to pay taxes to me every year. And, you know, that's how a lot of states were created. But whether it's, you know, nomadic warlords or settled warlords, at least you had a house. At least you had a community. At least you had the ability to grow your own food, even though a lot of that food was being taxed. And, you know, at least you had certain skills that you could use to sustain yourself, right? Compare that to modern poverty, where you have this large swath of people who are dependent, who are mechanical parts in a system that they cannot fully understand, comprehend, and control for themselves, with this, whole industrial revolution where you take this process of making a chair, for example, and you break it up into a bunch of different steps, and each person in that step only knows how to do one thing, but they don't know how to do the entire thing. Right? Like the poor of today versus the poor of yesteryear. The latter still had these skills for subsistence, and many of today's poor, particularly the urban poor, because I know the rural poor, a lot of them still sustain themselves, still practice, subsistence farming and that kind of thing. But particularly the urban poor, they don't even have like a lot of those skills to rely on to even sustain themselves at that level. For the urbanists in the audience, you might appreciate that Ivan also talks about the dominance of cars and how they've created this radical monopoly over land, turning our urban environments into the domain of cars, which not only compromises the environment for pedestrians and cyclists, but also disrupts our innate mobility as human beings. Stephen takes it a step further, right? And this particular opinion of his is a bit shaky for me. So it's something I've been letting stew in my brain a little bit more. But let me just read the quote. The radical monopoly cars establish is destructive in a special way. Cars create distance. Speedy vehicles of all kinds render space scarce. They drive wedges of highways into populated areas, and then extort tolls on the bridge over the remoteness between people that was manufactured for their sake. This monopoly over land turns space into car fodder. It destroys the environment for feet and bicycles. Even if places and buses could run as non-polluting, even if planes and buses could run as non-polluting, non-depleting public services, their inhuman velocities would degrade man's innate mobility and force him to spend more time for the sake of travel. I'm sure you could pick up on why that particular opinion is a bit shaky, right?
Yeah.
He's not just anti-car, he's also a bit anti-plane and bus.
To be fair, I'm also anti-bus, but like planes, I don't know. Like, are they great for the environment? No. Do you sometimes need to go to another continent?
Yes. Yeah. So he is, he probably reads like r/f cars and he's like, y'all don't take it far enough.
You guys are filthy moderates.
Liberals. But yeah, so I highly recommend reading the actual book in full for further insight and context, and I do want to dig into his thoughts on it further in the future, but, food for thought. Let me know what you think of those inhuman velocities. But anyway, memes aside, I think the benefit of Ivan's critique of the radical monopoly is that it provides a different perspective. Right? It sheds light on the negative consequences of excessive specialization, technocratic control, and the prioritization of speed and efficiency over human well-being. Zoe B on YouTube actually has a really great video on the idea of efficiency as this ultimate moral good. So I recommend checking that out, especially since the standard narrative that we are utterly bombarded by is that all these things are uncontroversially good, right? What I appreciate about Ivan and his ideas is that they challenge us to reconsider our relationship with systems, tools, and institutions, and he encourages us to strive for a more balanced and convivial society. And what does that convivial society look like to him? Well, let's continue. Ivan's solution argues for the development of new, accessible, and user-friendly instruments that would allow average citizens to regain practical knowledge and reclaim control over their lives, as well as resist the domination of specialized elites. That's why Ivan Illich's book, Tools for Conviviality, is sponsored by Skillshare. All right, I know that was a bad joke. Ivan believed that society should be organized to serve the needs and aspirations of individuals rather than creating systems that limit their potential and autonomy. And so for Ivan, conviviality, here we are back to the original topic, conviviality represented a society in which individuals had the power to shape their own lives, free from excessive dependence on institutionalized systems. He envisioned a world where people had access to convivial tools, simple, user-friendly technologies that empowered them to take control of their own destinies. For example, the dominant education system separates learners from the real world and disempowers them. Ivan advocates for more self-directed and community-based education where people could pursue knowledge and skills according to their own interests and needs. Ivan also critiques the over-reliance on medical professionals and called for a shift towards a more participatory model of healthcare that gives individuals access to information and resources that allow them to actively participate in their own health decisions, rather than being these passive recipients of medical interventions. In transportation systems, he also advocates for more human-scale and community-oriented transportation alternatives. He envisions neighborhoods designed for walking and biking, which would foster social interactions and reduce the environmental impact of excessive motorized transport. In essence, Ivan viewed conviviality as a transformative concept that aimed to restore individual agency and personal connections and a sense of empowerment in society. He challenged the prevailing structures and systems that limited human potential and proposed more participatory, community-driven alternatives. And to this day, his ideas continue to inspire discussions on how we can create a convivial society that values human relationships, self-determination, and a shared responsibility for shaping our own lives. What I found particularly interesting in researching this was learning that the book's vision of tools that would be developed and maintained by a community of users that actually had significant influence on the first developers of the personal computer. Mind-blowing, I know. Most notably, one of the first developers of the PC, Lee Felsenstein. He and several others were inspired by this idea within the book, because remember, Ivan is writing this before the internet. And they go and they take this idea and then they make the internet, or they make the personal computer, because computers existed prior to the personal computer, but they weren't as accessible. They weren't a tool of conviviality, whereas the personal computer of today is. And I just think that's beautiful and amazing. But Ivan's ideas did more than just, shape the course of human history. He also would shape the creation of a convivialist movement. In 2010, 8 years after Ivan died and 37 years after Ivan published Tools for Conviviality, Raymond de Boisvert published Convivialism, a philosophical manifesto. And in it, Boisvert begins by discussing the key theme in Michael Pollan's books, The Botany of Desire, which is a great read, by the way, and The Omnivore's Dilemma, which I haven't read yet. But the key theme is coevolution, right? The first book humorously suggests that plants manipulate humans to co-evolve with them, taking care of their needs in exchange for nutrition or beauty. And the second book, The Omnivore's Dilemma, the importance of interconnected components for a vibrant farm is emphasized, with corn serving as an example of a plant that relies on humans for survival. Boisvert proposes that focusing on the prefix co in coevolution can have philosophical implications, similar to William James's emphasis on the preposition with. By, examining the significance of these prepositions, co, com, con, or col, as well as sin, the author argues for a philosophy that recognizes omnipresent interconnection. Michael Pollan's books do this well in the context of food, but Boisvert wants to take the implications of this taking preposition seriously into rearrangement of philosophy itself. And now we're getting, kind of heavy, right? Yeah. As Boisvert argues, philosophers have often neglected the significance of interconnected relationships. While farmers recognize the importance of interconnectedness, how things like land and water and stuff all work together, modern philosophy, on the other hand, according to Boisvert, since the Renaissance, has been focused on these self-standing and independent entities, not interconnected entities. And I don't know how true this is because I'm not, I didn't study philosophy, but I'm just communicating Boisvert's arguments here, right? And so the idea of autonomy in modern philosophy, according to Boisvert, seemed to exclude the with factor in existence, relegating relations and interconnections to a secondary role. So Boisvert's saying is that philosophy is taught on this foundation that we are autonomous and self-sufficient first, right? And then everything else comes after. Rousseau, for example, portrayed an idyllic existence where connections, independencies were viewed as these impositions. We went from being autonomous to being stuck in this web of interdependencies. And then, as a result, coming out to that, the philosophical idea of liberation, for some, ended up returning. For some, meant returning to this original state of authenticity and disengagement from connections. The concept of freedom itself became something that was anti-interdependency. And so the focus shifted away from this idea of humans being inherently interdependent. But then this alternative point of view came about, right? And this shift coincided with the introduction of the term symbiosis in biology, which combined the Greek word for life with the preposition with. And the concept of symbiosis found its way eventually into everyday language and discourse. So that's the Greek term, symbiosis. And then we go to the Latin term, conviviality, meaning with living. And that long predated, science and philosophy, used to describe just ordinary experiences. And so to avoid getting lost into the philosopher's favorite pastime of, navigating various words and all their baggage, to boil it down to its simplicity, Boisvert is seeking to ask what a convivialist turn in philosophy might look like and what changes in philosophy might be taking place. For one, he's concerned with how embracing convivialism might change our understanding of metaphysics, right? By embracing this metaphor of existence as about the relation and conjunction between components, about the interplay and interconnectedness of various elements, rather than about a collection of separate units, you end up going from this position of isolation to this position of profound interrelation. And then you begin to focus on the interactions between people rather than just the experiences within people. In the sphere of philosophical anthropology, Boisvert argues that a convivial turn would mean redefining humanity. Taking this concept that, we're not just these purely logical and calculating beings. We are Homo sapiens. And the term sapient is derived from the Latin word for tasting, which highlights the human capacity to constantly try and test, to constantly experiment, to actively participate in interactions with our surroundings. So in this convivial turn, we return to the original definition of the name we gave ourselves, right? As tasters, as flexible, educable, subject to investigation and improvement, constantly testing and experimenting and seeing what is best in specific contexts. Seeing that taste, as sapiens, as Homo sapiens, taste is inherently pluralistic because there is no universal taste. There is no single taste that is like, oh, this is the taste. Everybody must adhere to this taste. Everybody has a different taste. We talk about that when we talk about taste. And I think the implications are particularly profound when we bring it into the sphere of prefigurative politics, right? Where as tasters, as experimenters, we are looking for ways to prefigure new social relations and institutions and relationships and structures and systems for the future in the here and now. And that requires tasting, that requires experimentation, that requires an acceptance of pluralism, because everyone has a different taste and everyone's going to bring something different to the table. And that's beautiful. And then also in the field of epistemology, the convivialist perspective challenges the opposition between subject and object in understanding reality. It rejects the idea of the mind as a mere mirror reflecting reality or projecting imposing conceptual schemes onto reality, because convivialism is about how the intermediaries, the facilitator interactions, how they affect the way that we perceive and reflect on reality itself. It also requires us to let go of this subject-object dichotomy in our pursuit of knowledge and understanding, which itself has implications on even the field of science, because, the idea of the scientist in the popular imagination is, the subject who is whatever that scientist is studying, that is the object. But convivialism causes us to pause and reflect on how that subject, that object, and how intermediaries between them affect their perception of each other, affect the subject, the scientist's ability to pursue knowledge and understanding, and affect the objects, if the object is a person, to do the same. And finally, Boisvert digs into the rigid division between nature and culture and how the convivialist perspective challenges that. The continuous interactions and transformations that occur in existence makes it problematic to consider the divisions between human societies and the ecosystems that surround them as fundamental aspects of existence, right? The boundary between nature and culture is one that constantly blurs. It is difficult to place, particularly when there's an embrace by certain cultures of that interconnectedness and interdependence between their culture and the nature that surrounds them. And then when you see that blurring of lines between culture and nature, you might also recognize a blurring of lines between human and non-human in the context of community. The idea of community being an exclusively human domain becomes less apt, I suppose, as you recognize the way that non-humans influence and affect and engage and interact with humans in this, collectivity. We use terms like community and city and society and stuff to refer to the human aspects of interaction. And we use things like ecosystem and biome to emphasize non-human aspects of interaction. But the interactions between humans, animals, plants, and inanimate entities do not always slot so neatly into that metaphysical description of reality. Of course, we use these divisions for certain specific research purposes. We say, oh, I'm a sociologist, I'm an anthropologist, I'm a biologist, an ecologist, etc. But we can't forget that conviviality asks us not to forget that those are human impositions that we should not let obscure our ability to make sense of reality as a whole. I know things got really heady there. I hope that everything I said made sense. And if you need a breather or some time to pause and reflect further on the implications on this simple, cute, fun to say little Latin word, conviviality, we're going to take a pause here. But next time, you can join us as we discuss how people have gone from this term to Urge's ideas to Boisville's philosophical implications to more recent manifestos of the convivial movement and how they can relate to degrowth and beyond. You can find me on youtube.com/Andrewism, and you can support me on patreon.com/SaintDrew. Once again, I'm Andrew, joined by Mia, and this is It Could Happen Here. Peace.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Let's talk about modern home shopping. It's sort of become a fun side hobby, right? Scrolling listings at night, dreaming about kitchens you've never seen, or backyards you haven't even stepped foot in, all from the comfort of pretty much anywhere. Redfin knows a lot of people like you want to own, but are stuck in this browsing mode loop. That's where Redfin flips the script. With listings that update within minutes and tours you can book right from the Redfin app, you can see your dream home the moment it appears. Now, liking a listing is easy, but actually landing it, that's where Redfin comes in. Redfin has over 2,200 agents with local expertise. And Redfin agents close twice as many deals as other agents. That means they want to help you win, not just window shop. Redfin is built to help you go from just looking to wait, this could actually be home. So become the newest neighbor on the block. Visit redfin.com to start finding and start owning. That's redfin.com.
Time for a sofa upgrade? Introducing Anabay Sofas, where designer style meets budget-friendly prices. Anabay brings you the ultimate in furniture innovation with a modular design that allows you to rearrange your space effortlessly. Perfect for both small and large spaces, Anabay is the only machine-washable sofa inside and out. Say goodbye to stains and messes with liquid and stain-resistant fabrics that make cleaning easy. Liquids simply slide right off. Designed for custom comfort, our high-resilience foam lets you choose between a sink-in feel or a supportive memory foam blend. Plus, our pet-friendly, stain-resistant fabrics ensure your sofa stays beautiful for years. Don't compromise quality for price. Visit washablesofas.com to upgrade your living space today. Sofas start at just $699 with no risk returns and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Get up to 60% off plus free shipping and free returns. Shop now at washablesofas.com. Offers are subject to change and certain restrictions may apply.
Welcome to part 2 of conviviality. What is it? What are people thinking about it? How is this funky Latin word changing and evolving and turning into an entire movement? And how is it affecting other movements? Last time we spoke about the idea of conviviality, which is essentially good vibes, fun, happy, chill, cool interactions between people, living well together and enjoying life in the company of others, making sure people are included and welcomed so they can relax and have a great experience. We spoke about the illest multi-hyphenate that is Ivan Illich. We spoke about the philosophical foundations that are being built around conviviality and what those implications have been on metaphysics and philosophical anthropology and epistemology and more. And so now we're going to get into the actual movement So the first manifesto was published by the Center for Global Cooperation Research in 2014. It discusses some of our current threats, including global warming and its consequences, ecosystem degradation, nuclear disaster risk, resource scarcity, poverty, wealth disparities, political disintegration, interstate conflicts, terrorism, insecurity, criminal networks, influences, speculative finance and politics, blah, 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 blah. You know the drill. If you're in this space, everything sucks. It could happen here. That's the name of the show, etc. The central challenge is that we could drive ourselves to extinction right now if we don't turn this car around, and we could take most of the world with us. This particular manifesto is just asking 4 basic questions and their considerations and what we should consider about them, right? For one, the moral question. What may individuals legitimately aspire to, and where must they draw the line? And the manifesto answers with considering that every individual has a legitimate aspiration to be treated with equal dignity, to have access to the necessary material conditions for their vision of a good life while considering others' perspectives, and participate meaningfully in political life and decision-making. However, individuals must also avoid exceeding bounds and succumbing to this infantile desire for power and control, which jeopardizes social cohesion and the principle of common humanity. What that means is that we need to actively be combating corruption, refusing to engage in actions that compromise personal values for personal gain, opposing the corruption of others to the extent of one's ability to encourage, fighting hierarchy. I mean, the manifesto doesn't say anything about fighting hierarchy, which I think is a fault to the manifesto. But I think for an anarchist reading it, the implications are pretty clear. And that's what I have to do with a lot of the stuff I read, like read between the lines and pick up the points that the author missed. And so that's the moral consideration, right? What should we aspire to? Where must we draw the line? We aspire to being treated with equal dignity, having access to decision-making power, having a good life, by having access to material conditions met, and we try to avoid exceeding boundaries, our social boundaries, and we should try to avoid exceeding social boundaries related to hierarchy and control and power. The second question is political. It asks us, which are the legitimate political communities? So the manifesto argues that the establishment of a single world state in the near future is unlikely, and political organization will continue to be based on a plurality of states. And that, I think, demonstrates the limitations of this manifesto's imagination of convivialism. That's what happens when you have this clearly radical idea, and you try to squeeze the radical idea into a fundamentally unradical and status quo idea as nation states. But let me not excessively editorialize. I'm just presenting this movement and what its proponents have been arguing, right? According to their perspective, states and political institutions are considered legitimate only if they uphold principles such as common humanity, common sociality, individuation, and manage conflict. To me, that's wishful thinking, but I digress. Legitimate states, and it pains me to even say this, but again, I'm just communicating what the manifesto argues. The legitimate states extend rights beyond civil and political rights to encompass economic, social, cultural, and environmental rights. They ensure a minimum income for the poorest citizens, while also implementing a maximum income to prevent excessive wealth accumulation. Legitimate states maintain a balance between private, common, collective, and public goods and promote associational activities within a global civil society. They view digital networks as tools for democratization and treat them as commons, fostering openness, free access, impartiality, and sharing. And they also revive the tradition of public service and prioritize the preservation of existing common goods while promoting the development of new common goods for the benefit of humanity. Again, it goes without saying, I take issue with this investment in states. I think a lot of their goals are noble, if they were not so tied down by this investment in the state structure. Because from an anarchist perspective, many of these ideas are not compatible with the structure of a state. And even theoretically, even hypothetically, if a state were to implement all of these changes, where people had full participatory involvement in decision making, where the hierarchies were flattened and where everyone had free access and open access and there were commons and all this la-di-da, some anarchists, not every, but some anarchists wouldn't even consider that to be a state anymore. But let's just get into the weeds of anarchist discourse and we're moving on. The third question that the manifesto asks is an ecological question, which is what we may take from nature and which is what we must take from nature, which is what we may take from nature and what we must give back. And the manifesto asks us to consider that human beings should no longer see themselves as owners and masters of nature, but rather as interconnected with it, right? To ensure ecological justice and preserve a well-managed natural heritage for future generations, humans must establish a relationship with nature based on giving back as much or more than they take. The manifesto argues that the level of material prosperity that can be sustainably extended to the entire planet is roughly comparable to the average wealth of the wealthiest countries in the 1970s, and that wealthier nations must bear the responsibility to reduce their demand on nature relative to 1970 standards, even as they maintain their current quality of life. Priorities of this manifesto include reducing CO2 emissions, emphasizing renewable energy sources over nuclear and fossil fuels, and shifting away from viewing animals as mere resources for industry. The principles of gift and interdependence should thus guide relationships with animals and the earth as a whole. Lastly, the first manifesto leaves us with an economic question, which is how much material wealth may we produce, and how should we go about producing it if we are to remain true to the answers given to the moral, political, and ecological questions. Manifesto asks us to consider that there is no proven connection between monetary or material wealth and happiness, which promotes the need then to explore alternative forms of prosperity beyond economic growth. As you could see earlier on, we're making those connections to the idea of degrowth. More on that later. And so this calls for a plural economy that balances the market, the public sector, and social solidarity economy based on the nature of goods and services involved. Again, their perspective, but while the market and profitability are legitimate, they must align with principles of common humanity, social cohesion, and ecological considerations. And by addressing the issues of the financial economy, such as rentierism and speculation, through strict regulation, oversight, market restrictions, and the elimination of tax havens, humanity can tap into a broader spectrum of riches beyond economic and material wealth, including the fulfillment derived from duty, solidarity, enjoyment, and creativity in various domains. Which, of course, highlights the importance of creativity and meaningful relationships with others as an essential component of a prosperous society, even if not materially or monetarily prosperous. The manifesto goes on to define convivialism, the term that they use to describe all those elements in existing systems of belief that help us identify principles for enabling human beings simultaneously to compete and cooperate with one another with a shared concern to safeguard the world and the full knowledge that we form part of that world and that its natural resources are finite. When it comes to convivialism, it's crucial for us to hold on to certain principles that can guide us in managing conflict, prioritizing cooperation, while being mindful of the limitations posed by scarce resources, recognizing, respecting alternative viewpoints and doctrines, opening the door to engage in dialogue, embrace diverse perspectives, and being open to questioning and growth. All of that this manifesto sees as essential to the idea of convivialism. It even goes on to propose convivialist policies, right? the minimum and maximum income, protecting natural resources through various reforms and regulations, tackling unemployment, promoting reduced working hours, supporting the growth of the associationist economy. Of course, I feel that's where the manifesto falls short, but I do appreciate some of the ideas that it introduces or that it expounds upon. I may not appreciate all of the answers to the questions that it raises, but I appreciate it raising those questions, even if I might have slightly different answers to them. The thesis of this manifesto seems to be that a different kind of world is not just possible, but crucial and urgently necessary. I don't like that it doesn't call out capitalism sufficiently or really at all.
Yeah, it seems to have an overly cozy relationship with the state too, which is
yeah,
not the greatest.
Cool. Not cool. They do say, quote, there will clearly be as many, perhaps conflicting permutations of convivialism as there are of Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, liberalism, socialism, communism, etc. Not least because convivialism in no way invalidates these. So, fair enough. In a sense, I appreciate that they can accept that their particular interpretation is not the only one that there can be. I'm sure by this particular passage, they mean that there will be socialist orientations of convivialism and liberal orientations of convivialism and Christian orientations of convivialism and etc. because they don't see convivialism as incompatible with any of them. I think I might take some issue with, I guess, not refining convivialism further. I appreciate that they themselves didn't refine it because, they're clearly quite liberal, but I think that convivialism as an idea is something that needs to be distilled further, because when you have this sort of free-for-all, everybody and everything goes approach to the ideology, I think it opens up a lot of room for states and corporations and NGOs to kind of slip in there and be like, oh, look at us, we are going to add convivialism to our constitution and that kind of thing. It's like, then they go and everyone applauds and like, wow, XYZ government just added convivialism to their constitution. 3 cheers for them. And then the government just continues doing what it usually was doing before it added convivialism to its constitution. It's like with the whole, I spoke about it in my Buen Vivir podcast episode. It's kind of like the situation with Yasuni ITT, right? Ecuadorian government was like, we are going to protect this forest. We're not going to drill for oil in this forest, even though it has a bunch of oil in this forest. Over $6 billion worth of oil in this forest. We're just going to ask the international community for like 3.6 billion of that oil. And once you all pay that, we're not going to drill the oil. And we want to set this precedent for other countries to follow and yada yada. And we added Buen Vivir to our constitution and all that's cash money, right? But then they got like $200 million worth of pledges. And then they were like, actually, no, we're still going to do it, even though we didn't get all the money. And then a year later, they're like, nah, we're not going to do it anymore. And then a couple of years after that, they started drilling in the national park. And then a couple of years after that, they started drilling even further, even closer to indigenous territories within the park. So, let's not get caught up in the fluffy words of states and corporations and
there's a version of this that happened in Bolivia where they did like a very similar thing, and then within half a decade like riot police were storming the offices of one of the giant like indigenous confederations. So it's
I mean, keep in mind a lot of what states do, a lot of politicians do, is just PR. Right? And I think a lot of people are able to recognize that when it's happening in their own country, but due to ignorance perhaps of other countries, they see a politician doing the same thing in another country and they're like, wow, why can't we be more like them? And it's like, well, yeah, to be fair, there are politicians and governments that are doing better than other politicians and governments, and not gonna like blind my eye to that, but
yeah,
you know, at the end of the day, they're still politicians, they're still governments, they're still doing their PR, putting out their best image, putting out their best foot forward to hold on to whatever power they have.
Yeah, well, and with both Ecuador and Bolivia too, it's like, well, okay, if you want your politicians to have PR like that, like, you too can block every single road in your country and start starving your capital out. Like, this is
yeah.
These politicians do not descend from the heavens; they are the product of a combination of material conditions and social forces. So, get better social forces.
Exactly. That's the that's our elevator pitch for anarchism, by the way. But I did say there were 2 manifestos, right? So what about the second manifesto, right? Convivialist Manifesto number 2, published by the Convivialist International in 2020. Ooh, recent. And they define convivialism as a comprehensive philosophy that encompasses humanist, civic, and political principles aimed at fostering harmonious coexistence in the modern era, emphasizing the importance of living together and outlining normative principles to guide that endeavor. The second manifesto of convivialism emphasizes the need for a new political philosophy to challenge neoliberalism and address global issues. Pause. This idea of this is something that you see a lot, particularly in that sort of NGO space, right? A lot of not radical organizations and movements will speak about challenging neoliberalism. And you could usually tell because they specify neoliberalism, they don't say capitalism. They're not anti-capitalist, they're just anti-neoliberalism, which in itself is not radical because neoliberalism in itself is just a recent permutation of capitalism.
Yeah, and I should point out, like, as bad as neoliberalism is, like, there are forms of capitalism that are worse than it. So,
of
you
course.
know, see, as evidence, World War II. Yeah. I just want to put that on the record
just
for all.
Yeah. But just for the sake of people's own ability to scrutinize information and scrutinize movements, it's an interesting trick of the language because by rallying against neoliberalism, they're able to like bring in a lot of the anti-capitalist people into the mix and draw from that crowd. But a lot of these movements are not themselves anti-capitalist. And, you know, if you want something more than a nicer capitalism, that is something to keep in mind. Even if you take part in the movement, nothing wrong with that. Still, something to keep in mind. So the second manifesto, it also highlights the interconnectedness of young people's concerns about climate change and environmental degradation. Talks about the struggles of those seeking freedom from dictatorships or those being forced to migrate. And it aims to offer an alternative vision for a post-neoliberal world by promoting shared values and a sense of agency. Various intellectuals, activists, writers, and artists are all committed to this collective project with the aim of creating this globally shared vision for the future that is more inclusive and more participatory. The second manifesto, like the first one, talks about the post-World War II growth in principles like human rights, and the shift in capitalism towards speculative and rentier practices. It talks about the decline of liberal democracies and the rise of illiberal democratures. And it also speaks about resentment growing from past colonial domination and radical movements, including Al-Qaeda, reflecting that animosity. Again, like the previous manifesto, it talks about ecological threats like global warming and air pollution, oceanic pollution, accumulation of plastic waste, nuclear disasters, weakening ecosystems, rise in unemployment, job displacement, wealth inequality, lack of regulation for transnational companies, political fragmentation, terrorism, all that fun stuff. And this time, the second manifesto outlines 5 principles to form the basis of policies or ethics or organizational actions, right? Common naturality, common humanity, common sociality, legitimate individuation, and creative opposition. These principles emphasize 1, the interconnectedness of humans with nature, 2, the importance of respecting the shared humanity of all individuals, 3, the value of social relationships, 4, the need for individuals to develop their individuality while respecting others, and 5, the recognition of peaceful rivalry for the common good. These principles are meant to be guided by the imperative of hubris control, which promotes cooperation and prevents the desire for power and excess. The manifesto also emphasizes the importance of balancing these principles to avoid their potential negative consequences. One of the things that the manifesto is really trying to get at, in particular, and the reason that it even establishes this imperative for hubris control, is because it argues that ideologies focus primarily on satisfying material needs and overlook the crucial role of recognition and desire, and that by reducing politics to the fulfillment of needs, ideologies fail to address the problem of limiting the desire for power and control. To me, it just seems like the people who wrote this manifesto aren't familiar with anarchism and anarchism's centuries-long confrontation with power, control, and the desire for it that has altered the course of various human societies. But I digress. The manifesto instead points to religions as playing the historical role of trying to curb our desire for power and control. That seems to me like a very poor argument considering the history of religion, but the point that the manifesto is trying to make is that modern democratic discourses struggle to restrain limitless desire and often reproduce the hubris that they aim to combat. And so the role of a convivialist movement then should be in part on persuading individuals to renounce the desire for dominance and reinforce the principles of common humanity, sociality, naturality, legitimate individuation, and creative opposition. Again, I don't think that the direction people are taking convivialism is radical enough, because I think it leaves room for it to fall into existing structures. I mean, the manifesto even talks about creating a convivialist party to reignite hope in liberal democracy.
Yeah, and I also want to just point out the sort of like, just how weak of a position it is to, you know, have one of your goals be to just to convince individual people to want less power. Like I think that's just sort of boldly anti-structural as a prescription.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess that's something that I've come to expect from certain milieus, right? A lack of engagement with structural domination and how structures inform how individuals behave. You know, like, yes, individuals act within structures, but I think people vastly underestimate structural incentives. Like, it's not just about, oh, if you get rid of this bad person from a position of power and put this good person in a position of power, then everything will be hunky-dory. Like, nah, there's still, like, you still haven't confronted the way that structure, that position, incentivizes certain behavior. But, like I said before, I'm an anarchist. I take what I like, I leave what I don't. They also say in the manifesto that convivialism belongs to nobody. So I've decided that, you know, my version of convivialism is not going to be this watered down, watercress salad kind of pithy, weak, limp-wristed take on, you know, world-altering structural change. Lastly, I did want to touch on, because I did say I would, the significant role that conviviality has played in the degrowth movement, particularly highlighted in texts like Degrowth, a Vocabulary for a New Era. Inspired by Ivan's ideas, conviviality and degrowth has referred mainly to a society that values joyful sobriety, responsible consumption, and the use of limited tools that are emancipatory and responsive to human needs. The ideas that Ivan outlined in Tools for Conviviality, which I spoke about in the first part of this two-parter, is considered part of the intellectual roots of degrowth as an idea itself. And conviviality is often discussed in relation to technologies, including digital technologies, and how technologies suitable to a degrowth society must be convivial. One particular tool has been developed for self-assessment, political education, and research in line with convivial principles, and that is the Matrix for Convivial Technology, or MCT. And the Matrix for Convivial Technology is, to go with a very basic definition, a normative schema that fosters discussion concerning degrowth technologies in context of political education. The MCT is meant for us to reflect on the dimensions of the materials we use in technologies and how we produce those technologies, how we use those technologies, how those technologies fit into the infrastructure, how accessible they are, how interactive they are with the environment, how adaptable they are in changing circumstances, and much more. How appropriate they are, and much more. But beyond the MCT, conviviality is also being used in the degrowth space to describe public spaces, goods, conservation movements, and even humans within degrowth literature. Transitioning to a convivial society is considered to be one of the core objectives of the degrowth movement, one of the core shifts that needs to take place for us to degrow as a society. And so that's the long and short of it. The Convivialist Manifesto, convivialism and conviviality as ideas, how they've changed and been adapted, and how people have been building on the ideas therein in the sphere of philosophy and politics and education and technology and more. Food for thought. I hope you appreciated this brief exploration. As I like to say at the end of my videos, and I consider it particularly apt here in the context of conviviality and convivial technologies, all power to all the people. Once again, you could find me, Andrew, on youtube.com/Andrewism and support me on patreon.com/SaintDrew. And as usual, this has been It Could Happen Here, where things happen. We talk about stuff. Peace.
Hey, we'll be back Monday with more episodes every week from now until the heat death of the universe.
It Could Happen Here is a production of Cool Zone Media. For more podcasts from Cool Zone Media, visit our website, coolzonemedia.com, or check us out on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find sources for It Could Happen Here updated monthly at coolzonemedia.com/sources. Thanks for listening.
Tired of spills and stains on your sofa? Wash away your worries with Anabay. Anabay is the only machine washable sofa inside and out, where designer quality meets budget-friendly prices. That's right, sofas start at just $699. Enjoy a no-risk experience with pet-friendly, stain-resistant, and changeable slip covers made with performance fabric. Experience cloud-like comfort with high-resilience foam that's hypoallergenic and never needs fluffing. The sturdy steel frame ensures longevity, and the modular pieces can be rearranged anytime. Shop WashableSofas.com for up to 60% off site-wide. backed by a 30-day satisfaction guarantee. If you're not absolutely in love, send it back for a full refund. No return shipping or restocking fees. Every penny back. Upgrade now at WashableSofas.com. Offers are subject to change, and certain restrictions may apply.
Gentlemen, I propose a toast to our good friend, Dave. You inspired this epic guys weekend. I'm sorry you're missing it. Everyone knows that when you fly, you need to bring a real ID or a passport.
Everyone but Dave.
So here's to finally figuring out how to get on an airplane, Dave. We'll see you tomorrow, and I'm glad you could rebook your flight.
He would have loved this restaurant.
Does your ID fly? Find out if you have an acceptable form of ID at tsa.gov/realid.
Flag football is exploding, and iFlag is leading the way. As the Guinness World Record holder, iFlag hosts premier flag football tournaments nationwide for boys, girls, high school girls, and adults. From first-time players to elite competitors, iFlag delivers top-level competition, unforgettable experiences, and a community built around the game. Ready to be part of it? Join the movement. Find your tournament and learn more at iflag.org. That's iflag.org.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.